Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If, with another fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Deku Was Born with Rabbit Ears and Wings. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. After the storm, Izuku feels so right, he supposes, as well as one can, when their body has been pierced through like they are nothing more than a punch card. Torso wrapped with bandages, and broken feathers plucked from his wings, Izuku is as well as he can be until he reaches Yui. "We'll have you see Recovery Girl in the morning," Aizawa said as he led Izuku out of the hospital, Shinso firmly planted on Izuku's other side. "You'll be benched from physical training tomorrow, to give you time to get your energy back, and decrease the risk of you getting more hurt." Izuku still doesn't know how he feels about that declaration, but he has a feeling that the decision is also a sort of punishment. Which is odd, in his opinion, because usually Izuku is given more training as punishment, not less. Maybe it's a Yui thing? Or just an Aizawa thing? Either way, Izuku can't bring himself to fight against Aizawa's decisions, even though he knows that he should keep practicing. His handler has always told him that he needs to be able to fight through injuries. And, to be quite honest, Izuku has fought through worse. But Aizawa doesn't seem like the type of man to change his mind. So Izuku figures he should save his breath and think of other things, like his friends who are texting him. He's woken up too early again, even earlier than yesterday, perhaps because he feels bad for disobeying Aizawa, perhaps because he twisted the wrong way in his sleep and aggravated his wounds. Either way, Izuku is up too early, and it's still not time to begin cooking breakfast. But this isn't a problem, surprisingly, because when Izuku woke up, there were messages waiting for him. 3 of his friends up and texting in a group chat. Tsunotori, Kirishima, and Yarashi, all wanting to make sure he's still okay. And he is, clearly, and he proves this by responding immediately and then sticking around for their excited, caring responses. It's odd, but not quite unusual anymore, how they take the time to check on him. Their hearts are so full of love, it seems, that they have enough to extend such kindness to him. They're wonderful, all of his friends are, and Izuku can only hope that he'll be able to return their kindness tenfold in the end. But for now, Izuku lets worries slip away, lets himself be consumed by nothing but the thought of responding to his friends, fingers flying over the keyboard in a way that his mouth cannot open, far too fast and too easy compared to the world of sound around him. And as the sun starts to rise, Izuku is happy. "Tsunotori, the pussycats are very nice. I believe that today is my day to work with Tiger. He is the biggest cat of the bunch. Kirishima, nice. 4th kind is kind of intense, but it's so manly. And Tetsu and I have been bonding a lot. Oh," he says hi to Yarashi. "By the way, Yarashi, Tetsu. He hasn't been texting as often. Is he good?" Kirishima, "Yeah, 4th kind just works us pretty hard. It's pumping me up. How about you, Yarashi?" Midoriya, "Yarashi, Air Jet is a great mentor. I'm glad I decided to work with him. He's great at coming up with ideas for support equipment. 2, I might be able to fly for longer periods if I get the right tech, instead of just a few seconds." Izuku smiles at the declaration, typing out his own response. Midoriya, "Really? That's amazing. We'll be able to fly together." Yarashi, "We will. You'll have to teach me your skills, man." Tsunotori, "Speaking of skills, how is Aizawa-sensei treating you?" You did not answer Kirishima. Midoriya, "Aizawa is a great teacher. He's given Shinso and I capture weapons to use, and either of us are very good at wielding them. Yet, but we'll get there." Kirishima, "That's the spirit." Midoriya. Izuku startles, hands tightening around his phone as he glances down. Yamada looks up at him, a soft smile on his face as he asks, "Want to join me?" Izuku nods quickly, a quick yes, popping out as he sends his friends a farewell text, turning it off before they can even reply and hopping down to reach his teacher. Yamada laughs gently, gesturing for Izuku to follow him, and Izuku does. They start off calmly, with Yamada pulling out ingredients and Izuku pulling out what he believes to be the proper kitchenware. And he must do well, locating everything, because he's given a brighter version of that gentle smile as he sets down the final appliance. Cooking with Yamada is nice, and Izuku knows it's something that he'll miss getting to do when the week ends tomorrow. It's rare that he gets to see Keigo and Rumi, and rarer still that he gets to make meals with them. His handler, too, makes it so he has no time to cook on his own, always turning him away from any stoves and ovens and instead towards strength training or studying. He's been spoiled, he supposes, and that will be his own mistake to regret when Saturday comes and Izuku is placed back into his normal routine. Stuck in his own head, Izuku doesn't notice the glances that Yamada sends his way. Not until the man clears his throat. Blinking, Izuku tilts his head and looks at the man, who offers a concerned look in return. "How are you feeling, little listener?" Yamada asks. "Yesterday must have been terrifying, yeah? You feeling all right?" Hands pausing in their movements, Yamada adds. "It's okay not to be, by the way, Sprout. You don't have to be all right." Izuku pauses. Because yesterday wasn't terrifying. Not really. Not for Izuku, at least. Was he tense? Yes. Angry. Of course. Focused. Absolutely. But Izuku wasn't scared. Nor was he terrified. And why would he be? Izuku wasn't scared for himself. It's as his peers say, he's trained beyond his years. While he knows he's still a far way from being a pro hero, from being anything like his siblings, he knew he could distract the hero killer long enough to keep the other three safe. He trusted Urashi, knew that his friend could keep himself out of reach thanks to his quirk. With Urashi, Izuku knew that the only options that remained would allow the pro hero and his classmates to go free, even if they didn't necessarily do the same for him. So, then, what was there to fear? Nothing. But Yamada is still waiting for an answer. So Izuku smiles, pouring as much happiness as he can into the expression to calm his teacher, and says, "I'm all right." "You sure, Sprout?" Yamada asks, and Izuku nods. "Of course. I knew that Urashi had the others protected. They were all safe." "And what about you?" "What about me?" Izuku repeats, and Yamada's mouth opens, but, oddly enough, nothing comes out of the blonde's mouth. He just looks at Izuku strangely, as if Izuku has said something bizarre. But, again, what about Izuku? Izuku protected Urashi, so that Urashi could save the others, and they did. Izuku's mission is to protect, to save all that he can no matter what. Where does Izuku factor into the equation, as anything other than a variable designed to save others? He doesn't. And that's just how it is. Still, Yamada stares at him, not looking away until Izuku clears his throat and says softly, "Yamada, I think the food is going to burn." Yamada looks away, at last, and Izuku can't help but note how the hero's shoulders are slouched more than usual. Yet Izuku doesn't mention it, because he doesn't know how to. And so the kitchen falls quiet as Izuku and Yamada fall into their routine of the week, silent until Aizawa and Shinso shuffle downstairs. "Ah, that's my cue to get going," Yamada notes. "I'll see you tonight, Sprout." "Goodbye, Yamada," Izuku says. "Don't forget your meal." Yamada nods to him, a quick response that keeps Izuku from regretting the command. Instead of focusing on such a blatant mistake, he plates his own meal, taking his place next to Shinso. Breakfast is quick and silent, as it normally is. Heading to Yuyui, however, is not. It's not part of the routine, how Shinso actually turns to him as they walk along the streets, opening his mouth and asking, "What's your favorite color?" "I don't know," Izuku says immediately, and Shinso frowns. "You don't? Why not?" "Do I need one?" Izuku asks, confused, and automatically clamps his mouth shut. Shinso's frown only deepens at the reaction. "You know you can ask me questions, right?" Shinso asks. "I'm not going to get mad, Midoriya." "Oh, right. The people at Yui are different." Izuku nods, and Shinso lets out a sigh. "Okay, cool. Yeah, you don't need a favorite color, but it's kind of something people have." "So I should have one," Izuku realizes. "It's not something you need to overthink," Aizawa cuts in, and Izuku watches as Shinso startles, clearly having forgotten the man just a few yards ahead of them. The underground pro glances back, eyes locking with Izuku's as he says, "If there's a color you prefer over others, that's probably your favorite. It can have a meaning if you want, or you can just think it looks nice." "Ah," Izuku nods, trying to think of a color that means something to him. "Red," Izuku decides, and Shinso lets out an intrigued noise. "Any reason why?" Shinso asks, and Izuku nods. "It reminds me of my family," Izuku says, thinking of Rumi's eyes and Keigo's wings. "They both have red." Another pause, and then, Aizawa-sensei does, too, when he uses his quirk. For some reason, Aizawa seems to falter in his footsteps. "Huh. What's yours?" "Purple," Shinso says. "Gotta get some self-love from somewhere." Izuku nods along, and Shinso continues with his questions. "What's your favorite hero?" "We both said it was a Eraserhead the other day," Izuku states, and Shinso snorts. "Oh, right. Okay, favorite animal?" "I don't know, maybe a hawk or a rabbit." "Fair enough." I like cats. Favorite class? I don't have one, Izuku admits. And when Shinso frowns, he quickly adds on. I like a lot of them. Okay, nerd, Shinso says. But he sounds teasing, and he's smiling, so Izuku doesn't feel bad about it. How about your favorite food? Izuku shrugs. I like whatever I get to cook with others, Izuku decides, and Shinso nods, although he seems somewhat concerned over the response. And what about Shinso? Izuku asks, wincing ever so slightly as he cuts Shinso off. Luckily, the boy doesn't seem to mind terribly, instead nodding and looking at him patiently. Why are you asking so many questions like this? Well, shouldn't I get to know you? Shinso asks. We're friends, after all, aren't we? Izuku perks up at the statement, nodding quickly. Yes, then, resettling, still curious. But do friends get to know each other by doing that? Isn't that a lot of questions? Shinso shrugs. I mean, it works, Shinso says. But if you want, I'll stop the questions for now. Izuku smiles, grateful for the reprieve. Don't get him wrong. Izuku likes that Shinso is trying to be such a great new friend. It's just as not good with so many questions, not all at once. So Izuku is happy enough when Aizawa leads them onto Yuyui grounds, Shinso simply showing Izuku cat pictures and explaining how he got his current pets. It's calmer, less invasive. Let's get to work, Aizawa says, and Izuku is ready for the day. Shouta sends Shinso off to one side of the gym after pointing out which machines to use, and then turns to Midoriya. Midoriya, who is perched on an unused sit-up bench, looking completely at ease despite the fact that he's sitting at an incline. Shouta decides to chalk it up to Midoriya's quirk. How comfortable the boy clearly is, holding back the urge to huff in amusement as he makes his way over to the boy. Ready to learn? Shouta asks, and Midoriya nods quickly, scrambling to get up before Aizawa stops him. You can stay there, you seem comfortable already, Shouta says, and Midoriya gives him that look again. The one that Shouta can't face without feeling angry, not at Midoriya, but for him. He's been getting that look since the first day. The one that lets Shouta know that Midoriya still isn't used to being a priority, to being offered things for his comfort. He's grown far too complacent, simply accepting what he's given and rarely attempting to ask for more. Shouta sighs, sitting down on his sleeping bag, which Midoriya seems to eye with curiosity and interest whenever Shouta pulls it out, and pulls out some papers. Instantly, Midoriya's attention shifts, gaze immediately locked in on the pages that Shouta holds. Since you aren't doing any physical training today, we're going to teach you something new, Shouta states. Your class won't be doing this unit until later on in the year, but it's a valuable skill to have. Seeing that Midoriya's interest is piqued, Shouta flips over the papers, showing Midoriya the title. Analysis. Midoriya gives no outward indication of how he feels about the subject matter. But he doesn't seem to have any negative reaction, so Shouta carries on. To gauge where you currently are, and how well you can analyze a situation with limited information, I'm going to give you half an hour to complete this assignment. Answer the prompt as completely as you can, and write any questions that you have on the back. Got it? Midoriya nods, and Shouta nods back. All right, do you have something to write with? Another nod, and Midoriya pulls a pencil out of his bag. Shouta sets the paper down, letting Midoriya pick it up before saying, Right, begin. Midoriya's eyes flit over the paper, already absorbing the information offered as Shouta turns away, looking back at his other student. Shinso is doing fine on his own, currently at a leg press machine. It doesn't have very much weight on it, not compared to some of Shouta's students, but that's fine. It'd be irrational to assume that Shinso would be able to work at the same weight level of someone like Midoriya, and even more illogical to assume that the boy could match Shoji at this moment. Limits must be pushed, yes, but going too far over is simply a guaranteed way to break oneself. In the end, that would only hinder Shinso. So Shouta sees his student working out at a reasonable pace, and he is satisfied. Assured that both of his students are working on their tasks, Shouta lets himself shut his eyes, recalling the plan for the rest of the day. For the morning, Shinso will be working out on his own, and in the afternoon Shouta will train with the boy, mainly sparring and working on reaction times. As for Midoriya, well, ultimately, it depends on how well Midoriya can grasp the concept of analysis. The boy is bright, Shouta would be blind to miss that. Smarter than his peers, Midoriya is clearly beyond the current subject matter that's being taught to his class thanks to his time with the commission. Shouta knows that Midoriya was the highest scorer on the written portion of the recommendation exam, getting a 99 on the test. It would be foolish to assume that Midoriya is anything other than intelligent when faced with the facts. But Shouta doesn't know how this will translate when focused on this subject. The commission has always favored flashy quirks over subtle ones, and their preference for bronze before brains isn't a hidden one. Yes, it's clear that Midoriya has been pushed to be intelligent. But just how far would the commission go to prepare Midoriya for the future? Shouta thinks it's reasonable, in the end, to assume that Midoriya will be decent at analysis. Perhaps somewhat better than most would, starting out. But there will be plenty of room for Shouta to help him on, refining the boy's skill. And that is what Shouta will spend the morning on, and will continue to hone tomorrow. His plan, of course, do not last more than 20 minutes, when Midoriya lightly sets the paper in front of him. Shouta opens his eyes to see Midoriya a foot away from him, eyes averted and ears drawn back. Shouta's first thought, upon seeing this expression, is that Midoriya struggled with the assignment, and is embarrassed. With how much the boy has excelled since the year has begun, Shouta has no doubts that it'd be embarrassing to fail so suddenly. But then comes Shouta's second thought, upon actually looking at the paper. What the fuck, Shouta thinks, because the paper is completely filled, front and back, with information. The prompt was 3 sentences long. The first stated that it was a hostage situation. The second the numbers of enemies, and vague descriptions of them. The third offered Midoriya the quirk he could use, and told him to explain how he would solve the situation. How could Midoriya have come up with so much to say? Did he repeat things? Make false assumptions? No, he did not, Shouta quickly realizes, as he goes further and further down the page. Midoriya's thought process is logical and orderly, information sectioned off in easily read ways, potential outcomes listed one after the other, depending on which of his assumptions about the enemy's quirks were correct. And at the very end, Shouta sees the reason Midoriya looked so embarrassed. Sorry if this doesn't fill all of the requirements. I ran out of room, and didn't know if I was allowed to use more paper. How? Shouta asks, and Midoriya glances up at him, eyebrows furrowing. Clearing his throat, Shouta asks, Your analysis. It's practically professional already. How are you this good already? Oh, Midoriya says, lighting up now that he knows that he isn't in trouble, as if Shouta would ever be upset at such a well-done response. My handlers believe analysis is an important skill. I liked analyzing for fun, so they had me hone it into a valuable asset. I see, Shouta says. I hadn't expected them to teach you analysis. They've had me learn a lot, Midoriya responds. I have to be better, after all. Better? Shouta asks, and Midoriya smiles, one made of closed lips and shut eyes. Better than my siblings, the boy says, wings perking up at the mention of his family. I have parts of both of their quirks. It's only expected that I'm made to surpass them. Shouta dips his head, tucking the lower half of his face into his capture weapon in order to hide his scowl. Kami, Shouta's dislike for the commission just keeps on growing, doesn't it? How strange. Well, Shouta says, it looks like I'll need to change the plans for today. Sorry, Midoriya says, automatically, and Shouta shakes his head. Don't apologize for surpassing my expectations. That's a compliment to you, Midoriya. I'll figure something out at lunch. For now, let's see how well you can do verbally. Verbally, Midoriya repeats, eyes widening, and Shouta nods. Sometimes, you won't have access to paper to write down all your thoughts. You need to be able to think on the scene, and practicing this will help. It's true, all of what Shouta says, but he can admit, internally, that he also just wants Midoriya to learn that he's allowed to speak without fearing what Shouta's reaction could be. God damn it. Midoriya nods along, luckily, and Shouta lets out a sigh of relief. Great. Let's move to the first scenario. Picking up a paper, Shouta says. You have a quirk that lets you manipulate light, but only within a meter of your right hand. And the morning continues, and Shouta can't help but be impressed with every insightful, thoughtful response that Midoriya offers, the boy's answers becoming more in-depth, as the greenet understands that Shouta isn't going to cut him off for speaking too much, or even for asking questions in an attempt to answer some of his theories. It's informative, in more ways than one. And so when Shouta sends his students off to lunch, he finds himself heading directly to Nezu. Midoriya has a knack for analysis, is the very first thing Shouta says upon entering the principal's office, and Nezu immediately perks up. Is that so? Nezu asks. Interesting, he wasn't sure just how much the commission has trained Midoriya, but it seems that they've covered quite a few bases. He's only 15, Shouta states. To be so far ahead in so many areas. They've certainly pushed him, Nezu states. Further than even you would, from my estimates. Much further, Shouta agrees, and the room lapses into silence. Nezu is, inevitably, the one who breaks it. I am considering the idea, Nezu starts. Of making Midoriya a personal student of mine. You are? Shouta asks. And then feels foolish, because Nezu doesn't say things that he does not mean. That is not to say that the creature never twists the truth. Call me. No. But Nezu likes to play it safe. To play by the rules, but toe the line so far that it bends for him. Molding to his whims and taste until the rules have changed, and he is crowned victorious. All without leaving the bounds that were once so narrow. Shouta doesn't show this feeling externally. But he is sure that Nezu already knows. The rodent's whiskers twitching ever so slightly in a show of delight. I am, Nezu confirms, and Shouta hums, finally taking a seat as he asks, why? Because that's the question, isn't it? Why is Nezu planning to take on Midoriya, who already has plenty of others guiding him according to their own whims, peering over his shoulder and adjusting his path according to what they see? Midoriya isn't just an unhoned mind full of potential, but rather one who has been trained and yet still has not reached his maximum. And Nezu, for every time that he has taken on a personal student, has never gone for someone who has already been trained, whose intelligence has been refined. No, it has always been those left untouched, the minds that were untampered with, and needing plenty of nurturing and guidance. Midoriya is not quite the same, not really. The boy has a brilliant mind, clearly, but he's not someone that Nezu would want under normal circumstances. So, again, why? 2 reasons, mostly, Nezu admits. To start, Midoriya is clearly a bright young man, with plenty of potential left untapped. His analysis is something I would like to see for myself, too. And I'm sure that he'll live up to my expectations if your praise is anything to believe in. And the other reason? Shouta asks, and Nezu smiles, teeth poking out in an inhumane manner. Admittedly, it's a matter of protection. Tilting his head, Nezu states, if I were, after all, to notice some oddities in the way my personal student acts, I'd be more inclined to investigate his background. And if you were to find something untrustworthy, Shouta continues, and Nezu beams, I'd have more cause to act. And there it is. The why. Protection. For another who reminds Nezu of himself, in a twisted, morbid, somber sort of way. The worst of ways, and yet enough of a reason. Shouta nods along, and the day continues on. Izuku follows Aizawa on the way back from lunch. Shinso sent ahead of them, so that he could start on his warm-up before sparring with their teacher. Aizawa seems angry, again, but also confident. His shoulders are set in a way that gave away a sense of satisfaction, eyes less narrowed than usual. Even his hands are at ease, tucked into his pockets and not near his capture weapon, as the man seems to prefer clutching at the fabric when he thinks he'll need to use it soon. It's nice, in his eyes, how Aizawa does not seem to be holding a grudge about yesterday's disobedience. Rather, the man has seemed, if anything, to be impressed by Izuku's actions today. His analysis apparently much better than Aizawa expected. And while, yes, it was admittedly rather strange to have to analyze things verbally, rather than on paper as he usually does, it was a nice change of pace. Yeah. It's nice, Izuku thinks, being allowed to talk, to speak his mind. He's not normally supposed to do so, but Aizawa seems to be focusing on letting Izuku speak, on how his voice can be utilized as an asset of its own. Aizawa really was the right choice for internships, wasn't he? Definitely. And so here Izuku is, now, surrounded by silence, as he walks alone with the man who is mentoring him for the week. The quiet feeling completely comfortable for once. Serene, almost. Yet, when Aizawa disrupts the lack of sound, Izuku doesn't find himself bothered by it. Not one part of him protests the change, not when Aizawa looks to him and begins to speak. For the afternoon, I want you to make a training schedule for Shinso, Aizawa states, and Izuku perks up. He's never made a training schedule before, he's only ever followed them. It should keep his limits in mind, but I don't want you to go too easy on him. He needs to improve if he wants to become a hero, after all. Should, Izuku starts, and then pauses, but Aizawa is already nodding for him to continue. More confidently, he asks, should I assume that Shinso is doing his training independently, or with someone skilled around and able to work with him? Plan 3 days a week for him to be with someone, Aizawa decides. How? Another nod. How experienced will they be? Somewhere around your or my skill level, Aizawa says, lips quirking up into what looks like the beginning of a smile. Don't forget to factor in class time, or the fact that he'll need to rest. Of course, Izuku agrees, because that's common sense. Aizawa seems satisfied with his immediate answer, because instead of adding more requirements, he says, at the end of training today, we can go over the plan you've made, and the 3 of us can make any necessary corrections. Though I quite honestly doubt there will be many. Pride fills Izuku at that, and he fluffs out his feathers eagerly. He'll prove Aizawa right, no matter what. Confident and ready, Izuku immediately begins to write the moment he's situated in the gym, only looking away to keep an eye on Shinso, tracking the boy and estimating his current skill levels based on what he can observe and what he has already seen. In the end, it only takes 40 minutes to create a schedule, one that repeats over a 2-week cycle. He spends the next 20 minutes changing minute details, and 15 more giving alternate options for workouts. And then, satisfied, all Izuku has to do is wait. And wait he does, until Shinso and Aizawa are finally heading his way, the purple-haired boy's training done for the day. "Let's see what you've got," Aizawa says, and Izuku hands over the papers. Aizawa flips through it, first slowly, and then quicker with every page. "This is much more precise than I expected," Aizawa admits, and Izuku beams at the praise. "It seems accurate, too." "Have you done this before?" Shinso asks, and Izuku shakes his head. "Then how?" "I've followed schedules like this my entire life," Izuku explains. "This is almost like one of my older ones, but I tweaked it a bit." "How so?" Aizawa responds, and Izuku hums. "Well, I had to get rid of any exercises directly related to my quirk, for one. And Aizawa said you should only expect to train with others thrice a week, while I have always been with someone 5 to 7 times a week. Your hours are much more limited, too, because I couldn't guarantee that you'd have constant access to some of the weight machines that Yui has, and because I originally spent less time on schooling than I do now that I'm here, so that had to be adjusted. That doesn't even take any other training they had me go through, but those aren't for beginners." Aizawa and Shinso stare at him, and it takes Izuku a moment to realize just how much he just spoke. "Oops. I see no problems with this plan," Aizawa decides at last. "Shinso, you will be following this training plan for the foreseeable future, unless any issues arise, understood?" "Got it," Shinso says, and Aizawa hands over the packet. Shinsu's eyes widen as he takes in the writing, and then, looking up, he asks, "I'm going to die, aren't I?" "Of course not," Izuku says instantly. "You'll definitely be tired, but so long as you follow the guide, you won't have to worry about succumbing to exhaustion." Smiling, he adds, "You don't even have to train as much as I did when following that schedule's inspiration, so you should be fine." "When did you use this training plan?" Aizawa asks. "Huh. That's a tough one. It's not always the easiest to keep track of dates, after all, when every day is the same routine. It's easier now that he goes to Yui, and his day isn't as systematic anymore. But if Izuku has to give a rough estimate, it was a few years ago, I believe," Izuku answers at last, and Aizawa and Shinso immediately do that thing where they both stiffen up, looking angrier than before. Was his answer that bad? Should he have remembered his exact age? Both of their faces smooth out quickly, however, so Izuku thinks he might be okay. "So," Shinso says, "is it time to head back to your place, sensei?" Aizawa nods, and Shinso lets out a half-hearted cheer. "Great. I'm going to go get changed," Shinso says, already walking off with a lazy wave. Izuku waves back, despite the fact that Shinso can't see the motion, then glances back up at Aizawa. His teacher is already looking back at him, and Izuku blinks in surprise. "You did good today, kid," Aizawa says, and then he looks away. Izuku is still grinning brightly when Shinso returns, but if his friend notices, he doesn't question it. And so the day is peaceful from start to finish, beginning with text from his friends, and ending at the dinner table with Shinso, Aizawa, and Yamada, content with the events that have occurred. Extra tests and special guests. It is not, in any way, shape, or form, unusual for Hitoshi to wake up before the sun rises. To be quite honest, it isn't usually a matter of waking up, but simply already being up when the sun decides to finally do its job. It is, however, unusual for Hitoshi to wake up feeling well rested. Insomnia is a bitch, and always has been, and yet this past week, it hasn't really acted as too big of an issue. Hitoshi can't state for certain what it is, but he thinks it is one of 3 things. The first option is the fact that he's been let into the hero course, and therefore he's less stressed and relaxed enough to sleep. The second is that the sudden, rapid increase of training and exercise is leaving Hitoshi out of energy, causing him to pass out the moment he can, because his body can no longer comprehend forcing him up. The third, and perhaps most embarrassing, option is that Hitoshi is falling asleep thanks to Midoriya's presence. More specifically, the boy's chirping. Because the boy does, indeed, chirp in his sleep. And whistle. It's rather bizarre, as much as it is intriguing. Because Midoriya is so silent in the daytime, but at night his heart is singing out, letting his voice be heard. It's nice, as much as it is a reminder of how Midoriya has been silenced much like Hitoshi, leaving a bittersweet taste to it all. Despite the connotations that Hitoshi can't help but form, however, Midoriya's sleep chirping has acted as a sort of white noise. And while Hitoshi has tried using white noise sources before, such as fans, or rain music, or even weird whale song compilations, none of them have worked. But maybe it's not just one or the other. Maybe it's a mix of all three, or maybe it's just a lucky week for Hitoshi. Either way, he won't be ungrateful as he sits up, stretching his arms over his head and feeling oddly awake, even as sleep clings to him. It's silent, Hitoshi can't help but note, and turning his head to the door shows him that Aizawa isn't in the room. It's too early, clearly, but turning his head the other way shows Hitoshi that Midoriya is already up and out of the room. Midoriya is always out of the room before Hitoshi wakes up. It's always Aizawa in the room, throwing the door open and giving him a tired glare before slinking down the steps. By the time Hitoshi gets downstairs, Midoriya is putting food on the table, and Hitoshi has been grateful each time, albeit somewhat confused. Because how early has Midoriya gotten up this entire week in order to make breakfast each day? The boy doesn't seem to be poorly rested, a lack of eye bags and glowing skin giving away his healthiness. But Hitoshi can't help but remember early mornings where he simply couldn't stay in bed, too tired and yet too awake, stuck to have eye bags for yet another day. Shaking himself out of his thoughts, Hitoshi decides he might as well get up and investigate Midoriya's disappearance for himself. Unsurprisingly, it doesn't take long to find Midoriya. However, it is somewhat surprising to find out that Midoriya spends his morning sitting on a window ledge, one that is far out of reach for any non-winged individual, at the very least. But Midoriya is winged, so Hitoshi just blinks up at the boy before saying, "Hey, morning." Midoriya blinks down at him, then smiles. "Good morning," Midoriya says, softly as always, before glancing at the clock on the wall. "You're early. Is Aizawa awake?" Hitoshi processes the question, and then smiles because fuck yeah. Midoriya asked him a question, before saying, "Nah. I woke up on my own. Yamada isn't up, either. He gets up in roughly 20 minutes, Midoriya states immediately, before tilting his head. "I can start cooking, though, if you prefer." "You don't have to," Hitoshi says, before remembering yesterday's conversation in the morning. "I like whatever I get to cook with others. But if you want to, we can cook together," Hitoshi adds on, and Midoriya beams. And that's how they end up in the kitchen, Midoriya taking the lead as he pulls out everything with an ease of familiarity that Hitoshi doesn't have. Not in this house, not in the home of his teachers. But Midoriya, for all of his timidity, isn't deterred by this not being his own place of being, moving around as easily as if it is. This past week has been good for Midoriya, clearly, showing in how he all but bounces from place to place, wings ruffling behind him and foot tapping as he works. All that's missing, in Hitoshi's opinion, is a joyful whistle, like the one Midoriya lets out in his sleep. But Hitoshi doesn't say that. Instead, Hitoshi does his best to assist Midoriya, grabbing dishes when Midoriya gets the courage to instruct him, or watching the food as it cooks if Midoriya needs to grab something else. He's not very helpful, unfortunately, too unfamiliar with his surroundings, but Midoriya seems to be over the moon as he works. And his happiness only grows when Yamada walks in. And isn't that something? Now, Hitoshi knows that neither of them are the perfect representation of an average kid. No, they're both too emotionally damaged for that, even if Midoriya probably doesn't understand this yet. But normally when a teacher enters the room, teenagers aren't excited about it. They're usually bored or annoyed, because being around teachers usually means being told to quiet down and get to work. Except that's how Midoriya's handlers are, aren't they? But the teachers aren't like that. And Yamada and Aizawa seem to embody this fact the most. "Good morning, listeners," Yamada says, and Hitoshi nods in greeting. Midoriya, however, perks up, ears swiveling to focus on the blonde's voice, and Hitoshi has to hold back a snort at the obviousness of his friend. For as oblivious as he seems to how Yamada reacts to the action, smiling fondly when the boy looks away. "You're usually asleep still," Yamada notes, looking at Hitoshi, and Hitoshi shrugs. "Insomnia," Hitoshi mutters, and Yamada nods in understanding. "Recovery Girl can probably offer some solutions if you need," the pro says, and Hitoshi hums. "I'll ask her about it. Thanks." "Of course." A hand tapping at his chin, he asks, "Want to get some coffee started? I know you and Shu will need it." "Coffee?" "Yeah, Hitoshi can do that." He nods, and Yamada helpfully points to where the coffee machine is perched, before shifting his attention over to Midoriya. And it's impressive how easily Yamada enters the equation, helping Midoriya without hesitation where Hitoshi was stumbling. This is Yamada's domain, and yet it's also Midoriya's, the teacher's home becoming a place of ease for his friend. Quite honestly, it reminds Hitoshi of his own family, seeing Midoriya work in tandem with Yamada, the taller male pulling a bowl out of the cupboard and passing it to the shorter without thought. Only a week in, and already a bond shows. Hitoshi is glad to see the clear care that is being shown to his newest and closest friend. Yeah, definitely his closest, because that's what Midoriya is now. Hitoshi never bothered to befriend those from General Ed, and his old peers were never quite so kind. So Midoriya, despite only a week of talking, is the only who Hitoshi can happily consider his greatest friend. One who Hitoshi will help, and who Hitoshi knows is finding a family of his own with their teachers, creating bonds by choice rather than by chance. So Hitoshi will stand to the side and make his pot of coffee, while Yamada works alongside Midoriya in a show of trust and understanding. Because being on the sidelines just means he can watch the action a little bit clearer, from higher up. And it's nice, comfortable and easy until food is done and Yamada has to go, disappearing from the kitchen in order to get ready for the day. Hitoshi hears a door slamming from upstairs as he moves dishes to the table, Midoriya packing some of the food into a container. It's Yamada's, Midoriya explains, when Hitoshi looks at him for a little too long. He doesn't grab any if he has to rush, and cooking makes his schedule tighter. Yet he still cooks with Midoriya, Hitoshi notes easily, and smiles at the fact. Sure enough, Yamada nearly races out of the house without his meal, jacket half on and hair surprisingly perfected in its bird-like swoop. But Midoriya stops him, shoving the container in his hand right before the man can get out of the door. Yamada beams, offering a pat to Midoriya's head, and Hitoshi can't help but notice how the boy flushes, looking ready to cry, as if a head pat is the most affection he's gotten in ages. It probably is. The sound of footsteps entering the room, purposely heard instead of muffled, is enough to shake Hitoshi out of that train of thought, and he looks over to see Aizawa glaring at him. Hitoshi blinks at him, wondering why the man looks so angry. "Hey," Hitoshi offers, and Aizawa's glare only deepens. "You're awake." Hitoshi blinks at the man, watching as the darkened expression doesn't fade. "Yeah, I am," Hitoshi agrees, and Aizawa scowls. "I'm too tired for this," Aizawa mutters, and Hitoshi watches as the man heads straight for the coffee. "Huh. All right, then." Shrugging to himself, Hitoshi takes a seat at the table, silent as he watches Midoriya and Aizawa. The two don't interact much, each focused on eating breakfast. But Aizawa ruffles Midoriya's hair before taking the greenet's plate, then holds a hand out for Hitoshi's. Hitoshi hands the plate over, trying not to laugh at how the boy has frozen in his place, eyes wide and staring at nothing. "Go get dressed," Aizawa says, and Midoriya moves automatically. But Hitoshi stays back to study Aizawa, who is watching Midoriya go with an amused look in his eyes. Aizawa then looks at Hitoshi, and Hitoshi raises an eyebrow, silently questioning the action. "Hisashi's idea," Aizawa says, and yeah, that makes sense. Midoriya is still a little confused when Hitoshi finally gets upstairs. But Hitoshi thinks he'll be fine soon enough. He's happy for him, and he hopes the boy can continue to bond with his family of choice, even if he doesn't realize that's exactly what he has. Izuku is allowed to exercise today. Only for the morning, Aizawa states, in a tone that offers no leniency. "You don't need to overdo it and end up hurting yourself, got it?" "Got it," Izuku responds, because Aizawa is one of the ones who likes it when he responds verbally, and so he gets to see that minuscule change in his expression that betrays the man's satisfaction. Shinso, too, seems pleased, so Izuku feels good for fulfilling their wishes, happy and light as he enters the training gym. The day starts with little things like warm-ups and weight training. Simple stuff, which Izuku never misses long. It's easy enough, although Aizawa always seems to make his way to Izuku's side whenever he tries to lift his usual weight. "I said to take it easy," Aizawa mutters, as Izuku continues to put weight onto the leg press. "I know," Izuku says. "You're going to max out the weight capacity if you go any further," Aizawa says, and Izuku nods. "I know." Aizawa blinks at him, then slowly walks away. Still, the man doesn't leave a certain radius until Izuku moves to something lighter. Afterwards comes capture weapon training, which Izuku both adores and fears. He's a little bit better, he thinks, than he was when he first grabbed the metal cloth. A little, but not by much. In the end, Izuku manages to capture himself more than he can anything else, and has to be freed by Aizawa too many times to count. Shinso seems to be the same, though so Izuku doesn't feel too embarrassed. The last hour before lunch is spent sparring, with Aizawa seemingly debating with himself before instructing Izuku to spar against Shinso. Izuku, for his part, all but hops into position, wings fluttering as he drops into a defensive stance. Ready? Shinso asks, and Izuku is pleased when his friend doesn't wait for a response, instead moving as soon as the word falls from his lips. Izuku reacts accordingly, diving to the side, weaving around the boy and forcing him to turn around, stumbling but steadying his stance just as quickly. Can't trip me up that quickly, Shinso mutters, and Izuku smiles. Good. And then Izuku lunges onto Shinso, tackling him to the ground before diving off, letting the boy hit the mat without him, leaving him sputtering. Yeah, it's nice, being allowed to train again. Not only is he able to get rid of the energy that's been buzzing under his skin since yesterday, unused to days off without any training whatsoever, but he's able to do so with a friend and his mentor. And it's odd, to Izuku, how important of a distinction there is between mentor and trainer. What are you thinking about? Shinso asks, right after landing a solid hit on Izuku, and Izuku hums. Your mind is on something else. What is it? Aizawa is different, Izuku decides to share, seeing no harm in it, even as Shinso gives him a perplexed look. Aizawa is the same as always, Shinso responds, and Izuku smiles. He is. But I meant compared to others. Shinso's smile drops, eyes narrowing as he asks, how so? He's a mentor, Izuku states. I've never had a mentor. I've had trainers, but they're not the same. They're more focused on the results than the person, Shinso mutters, and Izuku lights up, because he's right. Exactly, Izuku chirps. How did you know? A thought strikes him, and he tilts his head. Have you had trainers, Shinso? No, Shinso says. I've never had trainers like yours. Oh. He must be good at making connections, then. Verbalizing feelings. Izuku isn't always the best at that. Maybe Shinso will teach him. No. It's better not to ask. Izuku can learn this one for himself, surely. The rest of the hour passes quickly, and Izuku is proud for his friend when they're sent off to lunch. You're improving quickly, Izuku says, and Shinso snorts. I still haven't pinned you once, Shinso points out, and Izuku frowns. Well, of course not. I've trained my entire life, Shinso. You can't expect too much from yourself and too little from me. You'll just upset yourself. Shinso makes a noise in response to that, and then shrugs. Yeah, that makes sense. A pause, and then, they've trained you a lot, huh? Yeah, Izuku nods, and Shinso gives him a look. How far do they push you? Shinso asks, voice hesitating for a moment before coming back stronger. But Izuku just tilts his head. In what regards, he asks, and Shinso shrugs again. Do they don't know overwork you? Are you in pain often? They don't make you uncomfortable, do they? Izuku blinks. They don't overwork me, Izuku states easily. My handler is very careful to keep me from going too far past my limits. It's impractical to do so. It just makes future performance worse. Shinso doesn't seem satisfied, so Izuku moves to the second question. I'm not in pain often. You're not? Shinso asks, and Izuku shakes his head with a proud smile. No. I've learned to evade my trainer's attacks, so they can't land a hit on me. Shinso looks oddly sick, and Izuku frowns. Are you feeling unwell? Izuku asks. Do you need to see recovery girl? I'm fine, Shinso promises. The third question. Do they make you uncomfortable? Uncomfortable, Izuku asks, and Shinso nods. Not particularly, he has what he needs, after all. Food, water, a room. His comforts are met, and he has his siblings for any emotional comfort. Why would he be uncomfortable? Izuku doesn't know, but Shinso falls quiet, eyes hazy with distractions, and so Izuku keeps his thoughts to himself. He wonders where those questions came from, where that look of hidden panic manifested from, forming within his friend's eyes. He doesn't ask, and when Aizawa comes to get them, Izuku isn't sure if he should have. Shadow walks down the hall in silence, noting how his students do the same. This isn't unusual, not really, for either of them, but the tenseness in Shinso's shoulders and the questioning look in Midoriya's eyes give it all away. Something happened, or was said, and it wasn't good. Shadow will need Shinso to tell him at some point. At this rate, it feels less like gathering evidence and more like making a testimony for one of the worst custody battles of mankind. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Except it probably is. Shadow hates the commission, yes, but he knows better. He's just one person. If he tries to fight them publicly, with maybe one or two others at his side. It won't end well. Not for him, and not for Midoriya. But evidence, to be used as private blackmail. Should Midoriya express the need to get away, or Shouta feel that his student truly is unsafe? Shouta can do that. At least Midoriya seems to fit into their household. Should push come to shove. And if Shouta can't trust Midoriya to be safe in the care of his siblings. If he could, then why would Midoriya be with his handlers, instead of with Maruko or Hawks? Clearly they have a bond. But still Midoriya is rarely with them. If anything, they'd probably see Midoriya more if Shouta was his guardian. But now isn't the time to think of these things, no matter how much they infuriate him, because they're back at the gym. The boys are both looking at Shouta for instruction when Shouta looks back, and he nods, satisfied. Shinso, warm up. We're going to run through some stealth training together, and then I'll let you try it on your own. Midoriya, take a seat. Both listen immediately, Shinso beginning to jog around the gym, while Izuku drops directly onto the ground, eyes wide as he waits for further instruction. Holding back a smile, Shouta digs through his capture weapon before pulling out a stack of papers. Tests, from the principal himself. Nezu wants you to take these, Shouta says, and Midoriya takes the papers carefully, as if being too rough will destroy them. Don't stress if you can't answer something. You have as long as you need to finish it, too. Got it. Yes, Midoriya says, and Shouta hums at the response. Start. With Midoriya occupied, Shouta moves over to Shinso, who looks over from his stretching when Shouta gets close enough. Ready to learn how to walk silently? Shouta asks, and Shinso grins. He isn't grinning for long, too focused on positioning his feet and centering his weight to do so. But that's all right. It's expected. Shouta doesn't have to see his students smiling to know that they're satisfied when training is up and they've improved. It's how Shouta's students always are, thanks to Shouta's strict teaching methods. Well, all but one. Midoriya tends to break the rules, showing his joy no matter what when he feels it, even in the middle of Shouta's training sessions. And speaking of Midoriya, Shouta can't help but feel a mix of surprise and pride when the boy hands him the stack of papers, not 3 hours after receiving them. I'm finished, Midoriya says quietly, and Shouta nods. Great. You're going to help out here, then? It's clearly the right thing to say, because Midoriya perks up. What do you need me to do? Midoriya asks, and Shouta grins his trademarked smile, amused by how Shinso pales. You'll act as a test for Shinso. Close your eyes and see if you can catch Shinso when the boy walks near you. Like what we did, Midoriya murmurs, and Shouta nods. Got it. I'm going to drop these off to Nezu, Shouta says. Don't break anything. No promises, Shinso drawls, and Shouta rolls his eyes. Problem children. Nezu is, unsurprisingly, delighted when Shouta arrives with the papers in hand, nearly vibrating in that maniacal high of his as he takes the stack, flipping through it with speed and precision before laughing. Yeah, that's enough of an answer for Shouta to leave. Immediately. So he does, and he runs into his husband on the way back to the gym. For a moment, Shouta is confused, because doesn't Hisashi have a class to teach? And then he looks at the time, and oh, class is over, huh? I've been trying to find you, Hisashi says, grinning brightly. It's almost time for me to head out, but I had no clue where you and the little listeners are hiding. Come on, Shouta says, and his husband walks in step with him perfectly. We're in the gym. What are they doing right now? I know the Sprout still needs to take it a little easy, even if he's still as energetic as always. Shinso needs to work on stealth, so he's trying to sneak past Midoriya while the boy keeps his eyes closed. But doesn't Midoriya have a better sense of hearing? Hisashi asks, and Shouta grins. Shoo. If Shinso can learn to sneak past Midoriya, he'll be able to sneak past anyone. Pausing, Shouta corrects himself. Almost anyone. I'm sure there are people with even better quirks for searching others out. Hisashi just sighs and shakes his head, but Shouta can see the grin he's failing to hide. Letting out a snort, Shouta pushes open the door to the gym and sees, well, about what he expected. Shinso, expression one of frustration and determination, trying to sneak around Midoriya, only for the boy to calmly reach out and pat him on the head, making the former groan. How much can you hear? Shinso asks, and Midoriya hums. Enough to know that 2 people just entered, based on footsteps Aizawa and Yamada. Oh, that's impressive. You can tell our footsteps apart? Hisashi asks, and Midoriya opens his eyes, turning to see them. Aizawa tries to keep his as silent as possible, but you can hear him messing with the juice pouches in his pocket. Oh, huh, that's on Shouta, he supposes. And you don't hide your steps. You walk like you're listening to a beat, too. And what do I sound like? Shinso asks, and Midoriya smiles, oddly teasing. Frustrated. Shinso snorts, but doesn't refute, and Midoriya lets out a small laugh. Anyways, Hisashi says, clapping his hands together, and his students immediately turn back to him. Sprout. Since Shu here won't let you train much, want to head with me? I'm heading to my agency for my radio show, and I'm missing a guest. Winking, the blonde adds, it's great practice for the future, too. Helps you get some confidence. One look at Midoriya is enough to know the boy has been on board since Hisashi said radio show. But still Midoriya looks at Shouta with wide, pleading eyes. As if Shouta was going to consider denying this. Go on, Shouta says, and Midoriya doesn't hesitate to race over to Hisashi, practically vibrating as he snags his messenger bag and follows the blonde out. Confidence, huh? Shinso asks, and for a moment Shouta wonders if the boy will be jealous. But then Shinso smiles, soft and content, and says, good, he needs it. And just like that, Shouta knows that they'll be great heroes, both of them. He'll make sure of it. Hisashi whistles as he walks into his agency, smiling as Midoriya follows behind, eyes wide and eager as they dart around, taking in everything that they pass. It's like seeing a kid in a candy store, in a way. His curiosity is of a blind, wild type, causing his wings to flutter rapidly, almost a vibration, as he peeks into different rooms, each one a mystery until the boy can see their contents to his heart's content. And that's fair, to be honest. Hisashi's agency is an interesting one. He'll admit it. Not only is it a place for heroes and sidekicks to work, with a training gym and places to store costumes and gear, but it also holds more normal career choices within its walls. Like Hisashi's recording studio, which Midoriya squeaks at once he realizes where he is. Hisashi does his best not to laugh, but he can't hide the fond smile that tugs up his lips. Gesturing animatedly, Hisashi announces, welcome to my studio. What do you think, little listener? It's incredible, Midoriya exclaims. It's much bigger than I thought a studio would be. Yeah, want to see all of the fun tools I've got in here? Hisashi offers, and Midoriya manages to light up even more. And that's how he ended up giving Midoriya an in-depth tour of his recording room, showing off his soundboard and the other equipment that makes up his space. Midoriya takes it all in quickly, nodding along and tracking Hisashi's every gesture, attentive and observant. And this is where you'll sit. Hisashi cheers, pointing to the chair next to his. It's a backless chair, brought up in advance just for the Skvader boy, who beams with delight as he perches on it. We're set to start in 10 minutes. Any questions? Ah, yes, Midoriya admits. And when Hisashi encourages him, he asks, what exactly am I doing? Good question, Hisashi praises, noticing how the kid calms down, untensing. You'll be acting as my guest for the day? We'll chat a bit, I'll introduce you, and then we open the floor for the listeners to ring in and talk to you. What if no one calls? Midoriya asks nervously, and Hisashi shrugs. Then we just chat. It's like having a conversation with viewers, you know? Not really, Midoriya admits, but his nerves seem to be matched equally with an excited anticipation. But let's do it. Plus ultra, right? Plus ultra, indeed. A few more minutes pass, and then Hisashi turns to Midoriya. Ready to start? Hisashi asks, and Midoriya perks up, nodding quickly. Great. Just remember, don't be afraid to talk, okay? Okay, Midoriya agrees, and Hisashi beams, flipping his microphone on and watching his on-air sign turn bright red. It's go time. Hey listeners, Hisashi cheers. It's that time of the week again, where I bring in a special guest for Put Your Hands Up. Today we've got a hero in training from Yuyui, here to offer some potential insight, and maybe just some personal opinions. We're leaving the real decisions up to you guys tonight, or maybe we'll just chat away. That's up to how many of you call in, you dig. But that's enough from me, Sprout. Why don't you introduce yourself? Oh, Midoriya exclaims, then leans closer to his own microphone, which Hisashi quickly flicks on. Hi, I'm Mike Sensei's student. We'll just call you Sprout for today. How about that? Hisashi offers, and Midoriya responds with a relieved grin. All right, Midoriya agrees. I like that. Me too, Hisashi says. Sprout is one of my best students. Did you guys know that? As it turns out, he's completely fluent in English. Yao just found that out, Midoriya reminds him, and Hisashi nods, despite the fact that their audience can't see that. I did. Picture this, listeners. We were walking up to the agency, and this kid just casually goes, oh, I speak English with my friend all of the time. You've been teaching me absolutely nothing for weeks. I didn't say that, Midoriya squeaks, and Hisashi laughs. He's right, he didn't, Hisashi agrees. The kid's way too nice to say something like that to my face. Truthfully, I doubt he was ever going to tell me, in case it hurt my feelings. You're a good teacher, Midoriya protests, voice growing defensive. I didn't want to mess up your schedule at all. Awa, Hisashi coos, leaning into the microphone more to add. Isn't he just precious, listeners? Midoriya sputters, and Hisashi laughs. But don't worry, Sprout. I'm sure we'll figure out a better schedule for you, okay? Okay? Midoriya answers hesitantly, and Hisashi beams. Good. Now, any listeners want to speak to our guest? And the phone rings. Hello, welcome to Put Your Hands Up. Hisashi greets as soon as he answers. What's your name, listener? I'm Emika, a young, female voice answers. They sound nervous, but excited. And, well, just like Midoriya sounds half of the time. All right. Nice to meet you, Emika. What'd you want to say? I have a question for Sprout, Emika responds. Sprout, Present Mike says that you're a hero in training, right? All right, Midoriya agrees, nodding before cutting the motion short, remembering that she can't see him. How hard was it, getting into UUE? Emika asks. I really want to apply next year. Beauty don't know if I'll get in. Midoriya blinks, then hums. The test for me, it wasn't very difficult. I've trained and studied a lot, though, so that likely affected my experience. When looking at the others, they seemed fairly stressed. I'd say I'm not fully sure. But so long as you keep working hard, I'm sure that you'll do just fine. Even if my quirk isn't the greatest, Emika asks. A lot of people think I'll fail, because I have a quirk that isn't very good. What makes them think that? Midoriya asks, and Hisashi watches how the boy's eyebrows narrow. Well, it's not very flashy, nor is it offensive. Her enthusiasm is gone. Hisashi can't help but note, replaced by a timid, quaking voice. But where Emika seems to falter, Midoriya is growing. Leaning forward, Midoriya asks, What is your quirk, Emika? It's the first question that he's directly asked about her. I call it Nightfall, Emika says softly. I can change the gravity of anything submerged in shadows or darkness. The darker an area is, the better control I have. But most fights happen in the daylight, out in the open. But they don't, Midoriya interrupts, and he doesn't even hesitate to say. The most important fights happen indoors, away from the limelight heroes, and hidden in the shadows. Break their light source, and you'd instantly take over the entire area. Your quirk is perfect for underground heroics. In fact, it is? Emika asks, a hopeful note filling her voice. It is, Midoriya agrees. Underground heroes aren't very well known, but they're some of the greatest protectors that we have. They fight at night half of the time, which is your domain. You'd be a force to be reckoned with if you went that route. Underground heroics, Emika muses. I've never been a big fan of Crowdseal. Look more into it. Thank you. Of course, Midoriya says. I look forward to seeing you in the halls next year. Emika squeaks, and the call ends abruptly. Midoriya blinks in surprise, glancing at Hisashi. Did I say something wrong? Midoriya asks, and Hisashi laughs. You did great, Sprout. I think Emika was just a little flustered by your support. Oh, Midoriya frowns, then gains a determined expression. Well, I'll keep supporting you, Emika. I can't wait to meet you. The phone rings again, and Midoriya blinks, surprised. They really like calling you, Midoriya whispers, and Hisashi nods as he accepts the call. Sprout, a male shouts, not even waiting for the usual greeting. I heard you giving advice to that first gal. What's your quirk, though? Roman 2 think that would give away who I am, Midoriya says, and Hisashi cuts in to help. It would. We're going to give Sprout a night of anonymity, rather than shoving his name out in the open, so. But doesn't every hero student get their name broadcasted during the sports festival? The man asks. He doesn't sound like he's pushing, luckily, just a bit curious. Why not take the free exposure from this opportunity? We're working on my confidence, Midoriya explains softly. Mike Sensei says that I need to work on it. And he does a bit better when the spotlight isn't completely on him, Hisashi adds. I sprung this on him pretty recently. It'd just be mean to push him too far from his normal boundaries, ya dig? Got it, the man agrees. Well then, Sprout, don't let present Mike push you too hard, alright? He would never, Midoriya says instantly, and Hisashi beams at the trust. Well, I wasted my question, not that that's on you, the man assures, and Hisashi won't lie. He's so glad that his listeners are being such good sports today. I'll just let you keep on going, then. I can answer a different question, Midoriya suggests then. If you want? There's a pause, and then, huh. I can see why you're clearly a favorite. Alright, then, what's your favorite thing about Yui? The people, Midoriya says. They're all very nice. The man laughs, and thanks Midoriya, and then ends the call. Midoriya smiles, opening his mouth to say something. And then the phone rings. Wow, Hisashi exclaims. We don't usually get calls quite this fast. Sprout, you must be a fan favorite. And he is. On and on, the phone keeps ringing, and Hisashi can't help but beam with pride as Midoriya rises to the challenge, leaning closer to the microphone as he answers the questions thrown his way. Stutters and hesitant pauses, disappearing into thin air when he gets used to the act of speaking so casually to people that he can't see. His eyes shine, his smile is brighter than ever, and Hisashi can't help but watch with delight. Yeah, Hisashi is glad that Shouta texted him, requesting this very idea. It's exactly what Midoriya needed. The perfect way to end the week. Hisashi is just glad that he was able to give the boy a good memory, and a good ending to his week of interning under Shouta. It's what the boy deserves, after all. Return to what you know, don't forget what you've learned. The air is still when Izuku wakes up. The sun has yet to rise into the sky, to even begin to touch the horizon, truly. Shinso is asleep in his futon, sprawled out but silent as he rests. Everything is quiet, serene. Oddly summer. Or maybe that's just Izuku, as the boy gets up, slipping out of the room and shutting it silently, with the ease of one who spends every morning turning a knob just so, flicking their wrist just enough that the locks don't protest, don't make a sound, when the wielder is simply trying to begin yet another day. And this, too, is just another day, is it not? A Saturday morning, before the dawn and before the world wakes, before everything is steady and flowing and constantly going. It is the moment where everything is still except for Izuku, who, for once, is able to move on his own rhythm. In a few hours, Izuku will be back on his handler's pacing, on his trainer's timing. He will take these few hours as he can, while he can. And so Izuku wanders down the stairs, steps flowing, even as they feel weighed down, shoulders back, even though his head is falling down. Bright green eyes scan the living room, glancing up to the window. Wings stretch, then hesitate. He doesn't sit in the window, but he does smile at the first peak of dawn, a single ray shining down. Softly, Izuku moves into the kitchen, one ear twitching just so as he glides across the wooden flooring, socks doing their part to help him be quiet against the ground. It helps preserve the calm, not breaking it with noise that's unnecessary. Although a part of Izuku longs to make noise, simply because he can. But that would destroy his carefully created peace, and so Izuku keeps mum, just for another moment longer. Softly, surely, Izuku gathers all that he needs. A little more than usual, less worries about overeating. He's sure that his teachers, that Shinso, will enjoy the extra food. A nice touch, a small change to end the week right. But even as Izuku moves, as he works, he can't help but subconsciously slow down, as if taking more time will grant him more. It's silly, illogical. He does it anyway. Yamada, too, seems softer, slower, when he enters the kitchen. But still he smiles when he sees Izuku, and instantly joins the boy in making food. Morning, kiddo, Yamada greets. Last morning here, huh? Yeah, Izuku agrees, nodding along. Looking forward to heading back, Yamada asks, and Izuku shrugs. The answer seems to be enough, this time, even without words, because Yamada just nods back. There's not really much to say, in response to a question like that, anyway. And so the world falls silent. But not for long. Not for much time before Yamada hums softly. It'll be quieter, you know? Yamada asks, and Izuku thinks it's rhetorical, so he just stares up at the blonde. You fit in, Sprout. It'll be odd, having you gone. And for some reason, Izuku can't help but feel warm, he supposes, light, happy. Does Yamada really think that? That Izuku belongs? Within these walls, in this house that is not just that but a home, a place carved out for himself and his husband, Izuku. Izuku doesn't know how he feels, hearing this. All that he knows is that he's pretty sure he's never felt quite like this, even if he isn't sure what this is. Just that it feels like his colony, but more, somehow. Like the warmth Izuku feels when he gets to see his siblings, yet somehow heightened. Like family. No, that's silly. It has to be, right? For Izuku to look at his teachers, and want to compare them, to call them family. To take his teachers and put them on a similar level as he does his siblings. Of course it is. It's not what Yamada meant, anyways. People don't just do that. Of course they don't. It'd be silly to assume that they would. Izuku has his siblings, his colony, and a place to reside in. There's no reason for his teachers to ever feel the urge to want him. Izuku doesn't want to say this, though, because it feels nice, being told that his presence means something. With his handler, he only ever seems to mean something tiring, something that is nothing but a task to be fulfilled. So Izuku keeps his lips shut, set in a perfect little smile, and he works alongside Yamada with an ease that came far quicker than Izuku would have expected, but is still nice all the same. And if Izuku is happier than normal as he does so, nobody needs to know. Aizawa and Shinso come down sooner than Izuku would expect, or perhaps they took longer than usual. Time is odd when Izuku doesn't track it, so he's pleasantly surprised either way as the two take their seats, offering their usual thanks. And then Yamada does the same, prompting Izuku to perk up, head tilting as he gazes at the blonde. "I've got no work today, Sprout," Yamada explains. "General ed students don't have Saturday classes at Yuyui, you know?" He didn't, but Izuku supposes that it makes sense. Saturdays have always focused on the heroic side of their schooling. After all, it makes sense, then, that Gen Ed would be one of the only departments that don't come in on the weekends. Nice. "Oh, yeah," Shinso murmurs. "I'll have Saturday classes. Neat." Izuku smiles at the statement, happy to remember that Shinso is in the hero course. Aizawa gains a grin, too, although it's not quite so pronounced. But it's Yamada who lets out a cheer, saying, "Yeah, you're a great student, Shinso, but I'm glad to see you go." "You say it like that and sound like an asshole," Aizawa comments, and Yamada laughs. "Maybe so, but he knows what I mean." Turning to face Shinso, Yamada says, "I look forward to seeing you go far, kid." "Thank you," Shinso says, and then he shoves more food in his mouth, perhaps to get out of speaking any longer. Of course, glancing between Shinso and Izuku now, Yamada asks, "What do you guys plan to do today?" "Shinso, are you celebrating your entry into the hero course?" "My parents are taking me out to a restaurant," Shinso admits easily enough, eyes sparking with pride as he speaks. "Until then, I'll just pet my cats and try to get more sleep in." "Oh," Yamada blinks in surprise, smile freezing for a moment with the mild shock. "That's, the best plan he could possibly have," Aizawa interrupts, and Yamada snorts. "You're going to pass out the moment they leave, Shu? Your opinion doesn't count," Yamada says, and Shinso scoffs. "No, that just means it matters more." "He gets it," Shinso declares, and Aizawa nods wisely, making Izuku giggle. His laughter draws attention to him, and Yamada asks, "And what about you, kid? What do you plan to do today?" "Train," Izuku responds, already knowing what to expect. "My handler will likely want to test my improvements. She probably will send me straight to the trainers." For some odd reason, the mood seems to drop, the air becoming colder as Yamada and Aizawa's gazes grow sharper, icier. It's like Izuku gave the wrong answer, gave them one that upset them. But they asked, didn't they? Izuku only did what they wanted. "You train a lot, huh?" Shinso asks, eyes trained on his plate and away from him, unable to see the nod Izuku offers. "Do you ever do anything for fun?" "I see my siblings," Izuku says, but Shinso still doesn't look up. "That's it?" Yamada hesitantly asks, and Izuku looks to his English teacher. "No, I text my friends when I have the time. But I like being with my siblings. Keigo and I fly, and we like to cook and talk with Rumi." "You don't ever go anywhere?" Shinso asks, voice somehow changing, gaining one of those tones that Izuku just can't comprehend. "We're all rather busy," Izuku explains. "Our schedules all conflict with one another's." And they do. It's a fact Izuku has grown to accept, that it's hard to meet up with Keigo and Rumi. That's how life works, for a colony of heroes and heroes to be. It's not the most enjoyable truth, but it is an undeniable one. "Well," Yamada exclaims, and Izuku blinks, looking up at the man. "You're always welcome to come here, if you feel the need to get away from your training." "Really?" Izuku asks, and Aizawa snorts. "Course, kid," Aizawa agrees. "The house is always open if you need it." "It's nice having a cooking buddy," Yamada jokes lightheartedly. Yet Izuku can't help but note how tense the man's shoulders are, his grin oddly forced. Still, Izuku nods along, because he doesn't want to turn down such a kind offer. Not that he knows when he'd be able to use it. It's not like he can just leave training. He doesn't do that. Not if one of his siblings isn't there. It's not how it works with his handler. But still, Izuku feels that warmth build up yet again, and so he smiles. The rest of breakfast flies by, far too quickly for Izuku's liking but inevitable all the while. No amount of sadness will stop the flow of time. And so when his plate is clear, and so are the others, Izuku finally rises, getting up from his seat and heading to the room, where he begins to pack his things. At some point, Shinso follows, moving to the other half of the room to do the same. And as they pack, Shinso begins to speak. So, Shinso says, as he tucks a shirt into his bag. You said you're training today. Yes, Izuku agrees as he folds a pair of pants. My handler likes to check my immediate progress. And that means she makes you train, after a week of non-stop training. Izuku can understand how this might sound bad, perhaps, but, Shinso, you know I've trained harder for much longer, right? Shinsu's face twists, expression turning into something pinched and hurt. Izuku takes this as a sign to continue, and he does so, softly, saying, It's hard, becoming a hero, Shinso. You have to keep pushing, and the only way to get better is to work harder. This last week, it's been calm, especially due to my injuries. Aizawa was rather strict on how little training I was allowed to do, but that's all right, I suppose. You expected to work while injured? Shinso asks, apparently appalled, and Izuku blinks slowly. Heroes fight through injuries all of the time. They'd be dead if they didn't, Shinso. But you're not a hero yet. I'm training to become one, though, Izuku refutes, and Shinso sighs. Right? Dodo, you have to do your test today. The best way to see how much progress can be directly linked to a new method is through immediate evaluation, Izuku recites, the sentence ingrained in his head, straight from his handler's mouth. Then he blinks, glancing at the boy. Why? I was just wondering, well, if you wanted to hang out? Shinso rubs at his neck, looking away. I mean, if you don't head back right away, they wouldn't know you're not gone from Aizawa's yet, would they? As if on cue, Izuku feels his phone vibrate. He pulls it out, and is completely unsurprised to see that his handler has sent a message. Your trainers are here. Return back immediately. I have to head back, Izuku explains, and Shinso frowns before nodding, expression clouding over before fixing into a saddened smile. Right? Well, I'll see you Monday. Yeah, of course. Hiking his messenger bag over his shoulder, Izuku heads downstairs, offering quick farewells to his teachers before racing out of the door, unwilling to upset his handler at the very start of the day, ignoring the way that his heart protests the idea, longing to head back inside. Unknown to the green-haired boy, 3 pairs of eyes watch him go, worry filling each and every one of them. They can only hope that the weekend goes by quickly. Izuku is tired. But that's not really unusual, now is it? No, it is not. And neither is the way that Izuku feels like he is dragging himself through the halls, wings oddly heavy as he keeps them lifted, off of the ground and out of the way. It'll only hurt more if you let them drag, Izuku reminds himself, and it's true. Letting his wings collapse back, that just pulls at the muscles. He has to let them rest naturally, even when they feel like lead. Training had been exhausting, quite frankly. More so than usual, due to his handler's disappointment in his mediocre progress. You mean to say that Eraserhead taught you nothing about stealth? That he taught you no new tricks, except for the meagerest of changes? Your analysis was too advanced, and so he required higher assistance. Sharp eyes glared down at him, the yellow cold and frosted over. Nothing like the warmth one would hope yellow could be. Tell me, Skvader, what the point of your internship was. It was a rhetorical question. It always was. Izuku simply bowed his head, lips shut, and his handler hummed. So you've learned one thing. Good. She was pleased by the silence. But not enough. And so on training went, pushing limits raised by years of shoving forwards, aiming for higher and higher heights. Hours passed in the same room, and Izuku saw those plain walls and training mats in his sleep, an occurrence not at all unusual. It wasn't quite so fun, unsurprisingly, being placed back into such a monotone, pre-planned routine. One without early morning cookings, without the time set aside to simply wake up and bask in the first rays, without a moment to breathe or a time to laugh and talk and simply be. A weekend without the fun of having someone to talk to. And no allowance for speaking, either. But Izuku is here, now, and so he puts the weekend out of his mind, happier now that he's within the school's walls, where kids chatter excitedly to one another, joyful as they go along their daily paths. The door for one greets Izuku with its welcome familiarity, and Izuku lets a smile slip onto his face as he pushes it open, taking in the empty room with ease. He heads over to his seat, curling up automatically, feet sneaking onto the chair, head tucking to rest on his knees, and just like that, he's out. and then he isn't. Because it's impossible to be when a hand is slamming on his desk, forcing him back into the realm of consciousness, only to see a familiar blonde standing before him, smiling brightly. Midoriya has to be the one who's had the most excitement this last week, Kaminari is saying, eyes alight as he talks to the others, and Midoriya can see a few of his peers nodding. I mean, the hero killer. Midoriya, how'd you manage to take him down? Izuku blinks slowly, head tilting as he says, I just did. Because that's it. He took down the villain, yes. What other option would he have? That's so badass, Kaminari whispers. And Izuku doesn't really have a response to that, either. So he just watches as Kaminari gives him a thumbs up. You're just proving me right, Mido. Closest to pro out of any of us. Even Stain had to admit that, Monoma notes. You impressed the hero killer enough that he chose to save you. That has to say something, I think. It wasn't just me, Izuku murmurs. Yurashi helped, too. Gale forced, right? Hakikir asks, blazer shifting in a way that Izuku thinks she's tilting her head. If the slight wrinkle can indicate hair dropping on one shoulder. Stain didn't compliment him, though. Just goes to show that 1A is better, I think, Monoma boasts, a proud smile covering his face as he turns to Izuku and says, Good job, Midoriya. Show the world that we're number 1. Izuku shifts in his seat, glancing around the classroom. He locks eyes with Ida, who looks uncomfortable, and Izuku can't help but feel the same, even if for an entirely different reason. Why should I be praised, he thinks, and his gaze flits away, focusing on another. Todoroki, who sees his wide eyes and clears his throat, voice dull as he says, I doubt that we should be counting on the opinion of a murderer to sing our praises. Shouldn't that be something we leave to the public, and not those that we defeat? I agree, Ida chimes in, and Kaminari gets an odd look on his face, like he just remembered why talking about the hero killer isn't a good idea. Not in this classroom. Right? Sorry, guys, Kaminari apologizes, and Ida smiles awkwardly. It's quite all right. I can understand why some people may find his drive to be admirable, and the idea of earning his respect attractive, but at the end of the day, his values and his ways were not aligned, and he shouldn't be looked to as a beacon for judgment. Izuku watches how Kaminari nods quickly, and even Monoma looks sheepish as he moves to take his seat, neither quite able to look Ida in the eyes. Izuku doubts that he'd be able to, if he had made a similar comment, and so he gives the actions little more than a moment's notice, instead turning away, basking in the normality of Tsunatori's usual greeting, enjoying the lack of undue praise and special attention, as he listens to the girl's recollections of her weekend. It's a good way to start the day, and so when class begins, this is the moment that Izuku keeps in mind. And the day goes on. Classes are normal, as always. A little too familiar, and somehow a little too long and a touch too short. And it's lunch before Izuku knows it. Which is good, because Izuku has noticed something confusing about his class today. That is, nothing has changed. Where is Shinso? Izuku can't help but worry, but wonder why his newfound friend isn't in class with him. If Shinso simply didn't show up today, or wasn't transferred up due to some mistake. Either way, Izuku can't help but hunt down the purple-haired brainwasher during lunch, beelining for the boy and stopping right behind him in the lunch line, foot tapping as he stares at Shinso. What's up? Shinso asks, casual as can be, and Izuku frowns. You weren't in class. Why not? Shinso shrugs, grabbing a tray and letting out a noise. Well, that's simple. They put me into 1B, Mido. 1B? Izuku parrots, eyebrows furrowing. But you've made it clear that you're a fan of Eraserhead. You interned with Aizawa. It's clear that Aizawa would have taken you on. He sent you an offer. Why aren't you in 1A? Shinso snorts as he picks out his food. Some little grape nerd got expelled for being a pervert. Apparently he kept creeping on the girls, and went too far during the sports festival. Either way, there was an open spot in 1B. Expression pinching, Shinso adds. Vlad King isn't a big fan of Aizawa, however. That's awful, Izuku decides, and Shinso agrees with a solemn nod. But yeah, Shinso says, the two now walking to Izuku's usual table, Shinso keeping pace without any hesitation. I'm in the hero course, which is great. But it's not 1A, which isn't so cool. Nothing wrong with 1B, to be fair, but you wanted Aizawa, Izuku says knowingly, and Shinso nods. Eraserhead is something of a role model for me, Shinso agrees. My kind of idol, you know? Smirking as he sets down his tray, Shinso adds. It wouldn't hurt to get to see you more, either. Izuku squeaks, then smiles, joy filling him after such a kind declaration. Ooh, who is this? Tsunatori asks, blue eyes wide with excitement. Is this another one of your 1B friends? He doesn't seem as loud as Yurashi, but pretty neat either way, Kirishima agrees, smiling widely as he turns to Shinso. Wait, no, you were first place, weren't you, Shinso? That's me, Shinso agrees, eyes somewhat weary, even as he offers a tentative smile. I am in 1B now. They transferred me up. Congratulations, Tsunotori cheers. Welcome to heroics. Thanks, Shinso starts, only to be cut off by another tray slamming down, and Izuku blinks at the newcomer taking the spot across from him. Just don't fuck it up, Bakugo comments, sitting down. How inspiring, Shinso drawls, and Bakugo scoffs. Whatever. Don't make the rest of us look bad with mediocre performance, eyebags. Izuku blinks in surprise, staring at the blonde, who begins to eat without a second thought. Bakugo has never joined their table, not yet. Sure, they've sat at his table, but for him to join theirs, Izuku can't help but be a little surprised and excited. But mainly, he's just confused. But then Bakugo is looking up from his meal, and he glares at Izuku when the boy won't stop staring, and he growls before saying, "What are you looking at, rabbit? Fucking eat already. You can't be decent competition if you're too busy staring at me." And Izuku smiles, the message clear. The brash, bold words, the taunting comments. Izuku knows this well. Bakugo is clearly trying to be friends. After all, the blonde is rather similar to Rumi. It's no wonder that he picked up a thing or two over the past week. You interned with Rumi, right? Izuku asks, remembering Rumi's comment on it, and Bakugo scoffs again. Yeah, I took the bigger rabbit's offer. I think she liked you, Izuku praises. She said she had fun beating you in sparring. Izuku clamps his mouth shut, his words catching up to him, and ducks his head so he doesn't have to see the open-mouthed stare Bakugo is now giving him. Around them, however, his friends laugh, snorts and chuckles filling the air until finally Bakugo shuts his mouth with an audible click, huffing in disagreement. She barely beat me, and it's only a matter of experience. Stabbing a chopstick into his bowl, Bakugo adds, Tell your dear old sis that I'll gladly beat her ass next time. Just like that, Izuku asks, and Bakugo smiles wildly. Exactly like that. Izuku laughs, a quick sound of delight that tapers off when he catches the wide-eyed looks that many of his peers are giving him. Kirishima, Ashido, Tsunotori, Kaminari, and Takoyami all stare openly, and Izuku can't help but shut his mouth on instinct, worry filling him. Has he done something? Apparently not, because it's not him who they yell at, but rather Bakugo. Bro, Kirishima cries out. You two talked about internships? You know Midoribro's sister? That's so manly. Yeah, Ashido adds. I've only heard about the elusive siblings. How come you got to meet them? I interned with her? Dipshit, Bakugo shouts. Bunny here didn't talk shit with me till just now. It's impressive that you got offers, too, Tsunotori states, since you got out in the first round of the one-on-ones. You didn't even get into the one-on-ones, Bakugo responds sharply. And half of these extras got out in the exact same round. No, that was just Kaminari, Ashido corrects, and Bakugo scowls. I would have gotten farther if I went against someone else, Kaminari mutters, then shrugs. But hey, at least I wasn't the first one out, you know? Fuck off, Bakugo shouts, and then points at Shinso accusingly. You would have been out even quicker against eyebags here. You didn't know his tricks either. Shinso blinks, then opens his mouth. Are you complimenting me, or? Hell, no. Now rounding on yet another person, Bakugo challenges. You won't beat me in class today. I know better than to. He falls silent, eyes glazed over, and Izuku can't help but giggle when he realizes exactly what has happened. Shinso, Izuku gets out. Shinso, let him go. He does, and Bakugo blinks, dazed, before turning bright red and turning back to his lunch. I'll beat your ass during training one day, just you wait, Bakugo mutters. But the heat in his voice doesn't feel very scorching at all. No, it just feels warm. As it turns out, Bakugo won't get to beat anyone's ass during training today, because the lesson is focused on rescue. More specifically, a rescue race. No harming the other racers, All Might is quick to say, and Bakugo deflates in the corner of Izuku's eye. You'll be split into groups of 5, and your goal is to find me in the center of the city. Look at the listing on this sheet, and when the bell rings, run. With that said, All Might jumps into the air, heading off to some random spot in the middle of the winding pipes and giant buildings that make up the training ground. Izuku hums quietly, then moves to check out the paper that his peers are crowding around, flying over their heads and peering down. It feels like the recommendation exam all over again, Izuku thinks wryly, especially when he sees that he is once again in the final race. Quickly, his eyes flit over all of the teams, predictions running through his head. Oh, sweet, Kirishima cries, and Izuku looks at the red-headed boy. Midori, bro, we're going against each other. We are, Izuku agrees, and then he moves to land beside his friend. But not for a while. That's all right, Kirishima says easily. That just means we get to watch everyone else first. It always gets me pumped up, seeing everyone trying to do their best. It's such an optimistic, in-character thing for Kirishima to say that Izuku can't help but smile, pleased by his friend's cheerful nature. Who do you guys think will win the first round? Kaminari asks, sidling over and leaning onto Kirishima as if the boy is a wall, an eyebrow raised inquisitively as he glances back at the others. Personally, my money is on Ashido. For real? Kirishima asks. I think Ojuru might beat her at the last second. Nothing against my Ashibro, of course. But Ojuru is really manly. Yeah, but I've seen Ashido use her quirk to dissolve handholds into things, Kaminari dismisses. You get that, right, Midoriya? Actually, Midoriya murmurs, I think both of you are wrong. His friends pause, looking at him with surprise. Really? Then who do you think it is? Kaminari asks, and Izuku glances at the first set. Ashido and Ojuru are already in position, and Kuda and Hagakure are shuffling in their spots, the former with nervous energy, the latter just with energy. But it's the fifth who Izuku is placing his bet on. Because Monoma is standing right beside Todoroki, and his eyes are sparking with a plan. And Izuku thinks that he knows exactly what it is. Monoma will win, Izuku states confidently, and the boys hum. What makes you say that? Well, a bell rings, and a wall of ice quickly appears in front of the other four contestants, Monoma surging overhead on a second wave of the substance. That, Izuku states simply. That's why. Monoma gets the win, and no one is surprised. Kaminari is in the second round, so he leaves Izuku and Kirishima, not long after Monoma is dubbed the victor, and Kirishima looks to Izuku with anticipation. Who will it be this time? Kirishima asks, and Izuku glances over the options. For this round, it's Sato, Bakugo, Kaminari, Todoroki, and Takoyami. Normally, Izuku would have to give the win to Bakugo or Todoroki, but it seems that Bakugo is too focused on challenging Todoroki to see the true contestant. Another harbinger of mischief, and the other one a student who interned with a sibling of his. Takoyami is whispering to Dark Shadow and the sentient quirk, seems all too delighted by whatever the boy is saying. Takoyami, but just barely, Izuku decides, and Kirishima doesn't question it. He does, however, gasp along with the rest of the class when Dark Shadow throws his wielder, being slingshotted right after the bird-headed boy. How did you know he'd do that? Kirishima asks, and Izuku laughs. He interned with my older brother. You mean there's two people who got to meet your siblings before me? Pouting playfully, Kirishima shakes his head. I'm wounded, Mido, absolutely betrayed. Sorry, Izuku says, but he's not really, too happy as he jokes along to feel bad. Which is good, because it seems that Kirishima isn't truly upset, laughing along in a moment. As Izuku expected, Takoyami manages to win just seconds before Bakugo and Todoroki can reach him, his method paying off, although the boy seems rather ruffled when he returns. The void nearly caught me in its embrace. Had Dark Shadow failed to do the same, Takoyami murmurs. I was mere seconds away from eternal slumbery. Do not think I shall attempt that again. Not for quite some time, at least. That may be a good idea, Kaminari agrees, luckily unshorted out. Izuku blinks, noticing that the boy is wearing his support equipment, and he smiles at the sight. He's glad that his friends are doing so well. The third round is a rather obvious victory from the start, in Izuku's mind. The five to go up are Asui, Tsunotori, Shaoji, Ida, and Aoyama. Asui is the perfect candidate in this round, and so no one even asks Izuku who will win. It's simple, predictable, and easy enough. And then comes the final round, and Izuku takes his spot, glancing over his opponents. Jiru, Kirishima, Hanuki, and Siro look back at him equally. And it is Siro who says what they all seem to be thinking. Fuck, Siro mutters. You can fly. They really need to start remembering this. Can you just not fly for this? Jiru asks, her voice dry but her eyes practically begging, and Izuku sees a similar look in the others as well. And so Izuku nods, earning surprised exclamations as he promises, I won't fly for this race. Really? Kirishima asks, tears welling up in his eyes as he bangs on his chest. That's so manly, bro. Is it? Izuku asks, leaning into position. It just gives me a chance to use the other part of my quirk, after all. Other part? Honuki asks, and then pales. Oh no. Yep, Izuku chirps. And then the bell is ringing and Izuku is leaping, jumping high and landing on a pipe without difficulty. See you at the finish line. Curses follow his movements, and Izuku can't help but laugh, adrenaline racing as he lunges forward on powerful strides, thanking the rabbit part of his quirk with every bound. Sure, teasing his peers may not be the kindest thing, but it sure was funny. Izuku thinks he gets why his siblings tease their opponents so often now. He might have to try it more often. But the race is quick, and All Might and his class seem impressed by the fact that he was able to win so cleanly, even without flying, and the day is good. And by the time the day ends, it's like the weekend never happened. And that's what matters to Izuku. Upgrades. Izuku is the first one to school on Tuesday, but not for long. And it's odd how quickly the second one arrives, not 2 minutes after Izuku has seated himself. But here Bakugo is, storming into the room, slamming his stuff down before turning to look at Izuku. Morning, nerd, Bakugo greets roughly, and Izuku smiles back. Good morning. Bakugo stares at Izuku for a moment, then another, before he finally speaks again, saying, You gonna say anything else? You haven't asked anything else, Izuku points out, and Bakugo scowls. Do you ever speak before being spoken to? Sometimes, Izuku admits, a spike of guilt shooting through him with the admission, and Bakugo hums. Right. Cut that shit out. Don't bother waiting for a reason. Head tilting, Bakugo points out. Your sister doesn't hesitate. Why should you? Izuku opens his mouth to answer, Butha. That's a good point, Izuku thinks. Except for the fact that, it really isn't. Because Izuku isn't Rumi, just like he isn't Keigo. He's Izuku, and his handler has made one thing, above all else, clear. While Rumi may speak her mind, and Keigo may speak, Izuku isn't supposed to. Not when he's with the commission, at least. Yui is different. Yui runs a different course, plays a game with different rules. But habits are ingrained, and even if Izuku can respond, it's still hard to initiate without spoken permission from a previous encounter. But now Bakugo has given permission, Izuku notes, and he grins. I won't hesitate anymore. Not with you. Izuku agrees happily, and Bakugo grins widely. That's what I like to hear, rabbit. Now. The door slams open, louder than the time before, and Izuku blinks in surprise. Ida is usually the next to arrive, but the spectacled teen never slams the door, so. Oh, it's not Ida, but rather a familiar, pink-haired girl who Izuku hasn't seen since before his internship. 10 million, Hatsune cries out, and Izuku startles at her loud voice, flinching and nearly falling from his seat. Come with me. Huh? Bakugo shouts, hands sparking as he turns on the support girl. Why should he? We were fucking talking. I have his costume upgraded, Hatsune says without fear. Turning to face Izuku, Hatsune beckons him, head jutting to the door as she urges. Come on, before your teacher arrives. Izuku blinks, looking to Bakugo for advice. But the blonde just huffs and slouches, pulling out his phone. You might as well go, Bakugo points out. Who knows, maybe she made it so you don't look like a bush on legs. Letting out a startled laugh, Izuku moves, jumping out of his seat and following after an eager Hatsune, who rambles the entire way back. I've spent so long on your upgrades, you're going to look much better from now on, Hatsune promises. Power Loader even got me some stats on you through Aizawa, so I could test some theories to figure out what to focus on first. First? Izuku asks, and Hatsune grins. Yes, 10 million. Let me introduce you to our babies. Hatsune is all too eager as she throws open the door, startling Izuku once again, but not the 3 students who sit at another bench. Izuku recognizes one, Kenji Jujutsu, who now has an even bigger coffee mug by his side. The other 2, however, Izuku doesn't remember being there the time before. Are they other support students? Hatsune, Jujutsu greets tiredly, then glances at Izuku. Midoriya, right? Right. How is your friend liking his support equipment? Jujutsu asks, and Izuku beams. It works perfectly? Kaminari didn't short-circuit yesterday. Short-circuit? One of the new ones asks, her eyes narrowing with concern. Is he okay? Now he is, Jujutsu complains. Poor guy was probably worried about permanent brain damage at the rate that he was going. That's awful, the other, a girl with wings that remind Izuku of his own, murmurs. Your teacher let him just go on like that. Aizawa-sensei didn't want him to short-circuit, Izuku defends. Kaminari just went past his limits, sometimes. Oh, the winged girl lets out. All right, that's less concerning, I suppose. If Kan-sensei purposely allowed something like that, I think Kayama-sensei would have his head. And considering how much closer Kayama-sensei is to Aizawa-sensei, the girl shudders, and Izuku nods solemnly before tilting his head. Kan-sensei, he asks, and the girl smiles. The 1B teacher, she points out, and Izuku perks up. Ignoring his manners, he can't help but let some questions slip. You're in 1B? Both of you. Not AI, the girl says, gesturing to the first girl, who now plays with a spare wire on Jujutsu's workbench. Meki here is a little too timid for the hero course. I froze during the test, AI admits. But then she offers a small smile and says, but general education is pretty nice. Intrigued, Izuku wants to ask AI more about the normal courses. But another part of him screams to ask the winged girl about 1B, and how Yurashi and Shinso are. In the end, unfortunately, his indecision cost him, and Hatsune laughs before tugging on his arm. You can talk to Jujutsu and his friends some other time, Hatsune states. Takaimki and Akihiro are here all of the time, and I have no doubts you'll be back again for more business. But you're here to see your new look, so let's get to it. Izuku agrees quickly, giving a quick wave to the trio before giving his full attention to Hatsune, who pulls out a costume case with a flourish. Idly, he notes that it has the label 20B, while another nearby case has 20A marked on it. You've still got your original costume, Hatsune explains, gesturing to 20A. Just in case I guessed incorrectly, a rare occurrence, but still accounted for on your interests. Nothing changed on that costume, so don't worry about it for now. Anyways, open her up. Izuku does, and he blinks in surprise. Because the very first piece is his jacket, but it's not the dark green he remembers. No, this one is black with white accents, more like Kaminari's style, or Aizawa's. There's matching pants, Hatsune points out, gesturing to another piece in the case. I heard you went with your homeroom teacher for internships, and he's an underground hero. Now, I can't just assume that you're going underground, obviously, but hey, I can give you a change of gear that will help if you keep mentoring under him. I can't imagine that green works as well in the dark, after all. Flushed, Izuku can't help but agree, nodding along as he gently sets down the jacket, shifting the pants out of the case as well, only to gasp at the two pieces hidden below. With careful motions, Izuku pulls out a pair of goggles, colored a deep, crimson red. This is my favorite color, Izuku chirps, holding them closer to himself, and Hatsune cheers. Perfect. You fly high, 10 million, you definitely need goggles. These bad boys are strong enough that they won't break from a little hit, but they're small enough to store in a pocket when you don't need them. Tilting her head, Hatsune adds, I wanted to give you a scarf, too, but it seems that your teacher already had that covered. And that brings Izuku to the final item, a familiar, off-white scarf that Izuku has been working with recently. The capture weapon is pooled in the bottom of his case, a note resting on top, words written in a familiar, lazy scrawl. No hero is a one-trick pony. Use this however you see fit, and if that's as a weapon, you're always welcome to join after-school training. Izuku beams, a hand running over the fabric before he sets it down, quickly replacing his costume into his case. So what do you think? Hatsune asks, and Izuku responds honestly. I love it, he admits. I'll try out the new costume today, see how it fits. Good. Let me know what you like, and we'll get you more stuff from there. Smiling in a way that's far from calm, Hatsune admits. You're a pretty interesting guy. I've got plenty of ideas for someone like you. That's your cue to run, Midoriya, Jujutsu warns in a false whisper. She's going to see you as free advertising if you don't flee. Only a little, Hatsune defends, and Izuku laughs, taking a hesitant step back, grabbing both cases as he does so. Thank you, Izuku says quickly. But it's probably time for me to head back. Aizawa won't be happy if I end up late. True, Hatsune agrees, then nods. Right. Let me know if anything needs fixing, and I'll come steal you when I next have ideas. Of course. And just like that, Izuku slips out of the room, leaving all four to their own devices. And he must make a bit of a sight, he supposes, when he walks into a half-filled Wana with two costume cases and a giant grin on his face. But no one questions it, simply greeting him and letting him get to his seat. Unable to put the cases on the costume racks, the rolling shelves still in the wall, Izuku sets them both under his desk, careful not to kick them as he pulls his legs onto his seat, sitting on them and holding back the urge to chirp with delight. Yeah, the day is turning out to be a good one. And it becomes even better once classes pass and lunch arrives, with Tsunotori dragging Izuku to their usual table. It's near the maximum capacity now, with 10 of the seats filled. Izuku quickly takes his normal seat, watching with an amused smile as Shinso takes the spot to his left, causing Tsunotori to move further down. Todoroki joins the table, sitting across from Izuku, causing Bakugo to take the spot on Todoroki's right. Takoyami sits across from Tsunotori, and Kirishima sits next to Takoyami, a silver-haired boy who Izuku vaguely recognizes taking the spot on Kirishima's other side. Ashido sits across from Kirishima, followed by Siro and Kaminari. And the 10th spot? Well, that's taken by Urashi, who waves at Izuku with a bright smile before sitting next to the silver boy, who cheers in delight. Hey, Midoriya, Urashi greets, and Izuku waves cheerfully. Urashi, you're joining us today. Shinso told us that he sits here, Urashi says. And Tetsu wanted to chill with his internship buddy, so we're gonna start sitting here. If that's cool with you, of course, Tetsu says, and Izuku beams at the thoughtfulness. It's perfectly cool, Izuku agrees, earning another cheer from Tetsu. That's what I'm talking about. A manly answer. Ashido snorts. Are you Kiri's secret cousin or something? She asks, and Todoroki perks up at the question, eyeing the boys curiously. Unfortunately, they aren't, but they do seem happy enough with a comparison. Grinning his sharp-toothed smile, Kirishima explains, Nope. Tetsu and I are just good pals, especially thanks to internships. We both interned under fourth kind, Tetsu adds. That man was so cool, but he sure did work us to the bone. Oh, are we talking about internships now? Kaminari asks, leaning in. We didn't talk much about them yesterday. I want details. How was it, guys? I had fun, Tsunotori offers. I went with the wild pussycats. They were very sweet. Cute, Ashido cheers. I went with Gunhead, figured I'd learn some fighting skills, you know? Hagakure actually ended up going with him, too. Leaning her chin on her hand, Ashido adds. Actually, it seems that Gunhead gets a lot of interns. He was telling us about a girl who interned with him just last week. Said she was from Shiksu, I think. That's cool, Urashi compliments. Shiksu was my backup plan. If I didn't get in through recommendations, maybe I would have met her. Who knows, Siro teases. Maybe she would have gone to Yuyui if you didn't. Oh, you're right, Urashi breathes, then frowns. It would have sucked, not getting to meet you guys. I'm glad I got in, you know. I do, Tsunotori agrees, then smiles. But you are here, so don't worry about it. Right. With a cheerful slap of the table that shakes his tray, Urashi says. Well, I went with Airjet. He was pretty cool, though I think I got him in some trouble. From Hasu? Kaminari asks, and Urashi nods. Yeah, turns out we're not supposed to get permission to use our quirks so early. And doing so keeps us safe. But not the mentors. Who would have guessed? Wait, your mentor got in trouble? Kirishima cuts in, then looks at Izuku. Midori, did Aizawa-sensei get told off too? No, Izuku denies, mortified by the mere idea of ruining Aizawa's reputation in any way. My handler interfered with the situation. Handler? Tetsu asks, and Izuku winces at the perplexed expression that he wears. What's a handler? Midori doesn't have parents, Kirishima explains, sending a glance Izuku's way as if trying to confirm the information, to which Izuku nods. So he's got a handler. Oh, Tetsu says, then shakes his head. Yeah, I still have no idea what that means. It's simple, Ashido promises. It's just. And then she pauses. And then, slowly, Ashido looks at Izuku. And he can't help but shrink in on himself ever so slightly when she asks. Hey, Mido, what exactly is a handler? Beside him, Shinso stiffens, gaze locking onto his tray. Izuku hums, then opens his mouth. Welsh's likey a trainer of sorts. She's in charge of me, and makes sure that I follow the schedule. Like checking that you do your homework and go to bed in time, Tsunotori asks, confused, and Izuku shrugs. Kind of. She's in charge of a lot. But the main focus is that I do everything that they need from me. They? Kaminari asks, and Izuku nods slowly. Yes. The commission. You're helping the commission? Tetsu asks, and Izuku frowns, frustration beginning to rise up for some reason. It's not that hard to get, why don't they get it? Midoriya, Shinso says, voice oddly stiff. Do you have your schedule on you? Right, his schedule. Perking up, Izuku says. I have a copy on my phone. I'll pull it up. As Izuku finds the schedule for the week, Shinso explains for him, saying his handler plans his entire day, every day, and makes sure that he follows everything that she tells him to do. He doesn't help the commission. He's being raised by the commission. That's so manly, Tetsu says. Dude, that's so. Izuku slides his phone over. The schedule on full display? Cool bro, what is this? My schedule for the week, Izuku says simply, and Tetsu frowns. That's just for this week? He asks, and Izuku nods. Dude, that's so much. Let me see, Ashido says, leaning in. And then she's peering at Izuku's schedule and frowning, too, agreeing as she says. Midori, that's a lot. How do you find time to rest and relax? My sleep schedule is blocked out, too, Izuku points out helpfully. But the answer seems to upset her more, and his peers, and suddenly the entire table, except for Shinso, is up, crowding around Tetsu and his phone, making their own little comments and upset expressions as they do so. And then they're looking at him, rather oddly, and Todoroki is the one to ask. So your handler is just a sort off-planner for you? Exactly, Izuku chirps, glad that there's a descriptor for her. But his peers don't seem to share his joy. Silly question, Ashido asks. But she doesn't seem amused when she continues with, but does your handler ever hang out with you? Spend time with you? But just for fun? No, Izuku responds, now the confused one. Why would she do that? Because she's a sort of caretaker of yours? Ashido responds, and Izuku just shrugs, pocketing his phone. She's in charge of me. We aren't family. I have siblings, Ashido. Siblings you don't even get to see, Shinso mutters, and Izuku pouts. That's not their fault. They're busy. Hawks did seem rather upset by his lack of time that he gets to see you, Takoyami agrees. It was truly a shame, seeing someone brought so down. Wait, Hawks? Ashido cuts in, now distracted. Midori, your brother is Hawks. Yeah? Tilting his head, Izuku says. I could have sworn I told you about Keigo. You only call your siblings by their names, Birdbrain, Bakugo cuts in. Just like how you only call your dear old sis by hers. Well, it'd be weird to call her Maruko all of the time, Izuku protests, causing a second wave of chaos. The rest of lunch passes in an odd manner, with his friends freaking out over his siblings, and by the time they leave, they seem to have forgotten all about the oddities of his handler. They haven't, not really, but Izuku doesn't need to know this. Not yet. Izuku vibrates as he heads out to the training field, eager as he sees the familiar forest from the hide-and-seek game that his class played not long ago. He's already decked out in his costume, his new, underground-inspired one, because Hatsune put so much time into it, and the design is so nice, how could he not wear it? And heading for the trees, smiling as he spots Aizawa next to All Might. And then Aizawa spots him, and Izuku can't help but feel his face warm when Aizawa's eyes seem to focus on the goggles a bit longer than the rest of the outfit. Good outfit, Aizawa praises, and Izuku beams, one hand reaching up to clutch his capture weapon, wings fluttering with delight. Aizawa, as always, looks past the action, simply dipping his chin into his capture weapon and letting his gaze travel to the other students. After a few more minutes of waiting, the rest of Izuku's peers are there, and Aizawa clears his throat before offering an explanation. Today, we'll be working on certain aspects of villain confrontation. More specifically, you'll be focusing on evasion, pursuit, and captures. But since most students learn these skills through practice, we'll start with a few rounds of capture the flag. A few rounds off what? Izuku watches on, mystified as All Might pulls out 4 different, brightly colored flags from somewhere. Where, exactly, Izuku is unsure. Just like he's unsure on what capturing a flag has to do with, well, the first 2 things that Aizawa mentioned. You'll be divided into teams of 4, All Might explains happily. Teams will be divided through lots, and you'll be given 5 minutes to plan where you will plant your flag once sent to your designated location. Afterwards, there will be 15 minutes until the match ends. Unless a team gets all 4 flags, in which the game ends effective immediately, Aizawa cuts in. Any questions? No one responds, and Aizawa nods. Come get your papers, then. Just like that, his peers are moving, eager and excited as they grab their slips of paper and find their teammates. Izuku watches, intrigued, as his peers find their groups. Sato, Takoyami, Aoyama, Shiro, and Ashido make up one group, while Asui, Honuki, Shaoji, Hagakure, and Kuda make another. Kirishima, Ajaru, Juru, Tsunotori, and Ida make their own little circle, gathering around one another. And the 4th team is comprised of Izuku, Todoroki, Kaminari, Bakugo, and Monoma. Izuku blinks, looking at Todoroki, and asks, "Do you know what capture the flag is?" "No," Todoroki responds, and Izuku blinks before turning to Bakugo, who sighs. Sheltered little alright. Capture the flag is simple enough that not even Dunce Face can mess it up. Hey, Kaminari cuts in, but Bakugo just rolls his eyes and keeps explaining. Those fuckers over there have flags, just like us. When we're given 5 minutes, it's to hide the fucking flag. They're going to do the same damn thing, got it? The moment time is up, we'll have some of us on defense to keep others from getting our flag, and the rest will run off to get the flags of everyone else. How do we decide who is on defense and who is on offense? Todoroki asks, and Izuku nods along. Well, if we're going for a quick match, which we are, because we aren't half-assing this, then we want our quickest, heaviest hitters on offense. Defense is those who can cover a wide area and stay a threat. Isn't that most of us? Izuku asks, and Bakugo nods with a wicked grin. We're the best goddamn team possible, you got that? Now, here's what we'll do. 5 minutes pass quickly, and Izuku flutters with delight as Kaminari finishes, hiding their bright green flag to the best of his ability. A bell rings through the air, and then Aizawa calls for the match to start. Let's kick some ass, Bakugo cries out, eyes wild with manic glee. And they proceed to do exactly that. Time blurs together quickly, the plan simple but efficient. Izuku, Bakugo, and Todoroki each hunt down one of the other teams on their own, and Monoma and Kaminari stay behind. Monoma sticks close to Kaminari, prepared to tap the boy and copy his quirk the moment trouble appears. They don't even have to fight 2 people before the trio comes back, each clutching a flag and showing joy in their own way. Izuku grinning widely, Bakugo cackling madly, and Todoroki's eyes glimmering with a slight spark that Izuku has come to equate with joy. Aizawa calls for their return, looking exasperated as he does so. Plus Ultra doesn't have to apply to everything, Aizawa points out with a sigh. That match lasted 3 minutes, guys. You put Midori, Bakugo, and Todoroki on one team, Ashido points out accusingly, and All Might winces. Maybe we should switch up the teams, All Might suggests, to which 15 students sigh in relief, while 5 agree with a shrug. And so 4 new teams are made. The first group consists of Shiro, Bakugo, Kirishima, Tsunotori, and Takoyami, while the second has Monoma, Kuda, Ida, Kaminari, and Asui. The third has Aoyama, Ashido, and Sato, Anjuru, and Todoroki, and Izuku is teamed up with Jiru, Shoji, Honuki, and Hagakure. Glancing at his team, Izuku grins, because there's one thing that they all are good at. And when they glance around, they seem to notice it too. So, Hagakure says, and Izuku can see how her gloves are vibrating with her excitement. Stealth, huh? Needless to say, the second match goes on much longer because no one can find Izuku's team's flag. Aizawa never clarified that the flag had to be hidden in a single spot, after all. And so the flag jumps from person to person, starting with Midoriya, but quickly landing in Shoji's hands when Midoriya goes to sneak away, searching for someone to lure away from their base. From Shoji, it passes to Honuki, who fakes hiding it in a softened patch when Jiru alerts him to others being nearby, and more importantly, watching, only for Hagakure to slip in, taking the flag and hiding it in her hands, hidden within her grasp, out of sight of those who begin to fight against Jiru, Honuki, and Shoji, out of mind and unseen as she slips away, finding safety further within the trees. They finally end up in a tie with Bakugo's team, in the end, Bakugo having stolen 2 flags. But Izuku manages to drop in and steal Bakugo's just before time is up. This will be the final round, Aizawa announces, once everyone is gathered around him yet again. After this, we'll go over different techniques on evasion and pursuit. Go ahead and draw your lots. I hope I get Midoriya, Kaminari mutters, as he puts his hand into the box. He's like the lucky teammate. I just get really good partners, Midoriya protests, to which Aoyama lets out a dramatic sigh. So humble, yet so naive, Aoyama says with a despairing tone. Midoriya, what team are you on? Oh, quickly, Izuku plucks out a paper, then opens it. 4? Murd, Aoyama mutters, then slinks away. Kaminari, too, looks worried, paper showing that he's in Group 1. And then he hears a cheer. All right, Kirishima shouts, racing over to Izuku. Mido, we're teammates. Really? Izuku beams when he sees the matching number on Kirishima's slip, glad that he finally gets to work with his redhead friend. And just like that, his peers are flocking together, and groups grow before his eyes for the third and final time. The first group consists of Kaminari, Asui, Tsunotori, Hagakure, and Honuki. The second has Aoyama, Ashido, Sato, Shiro, and Bakugo. Jiru, Takoyami, Ida, Shaoji, and Todoroki make up the third group. The final group is Izuku's, with Ajiru, Kirishima, Monoma, and Kuda on his side. Oh, look at that! Izuku hears All Might whisper to Aizawa, his ears picking up the sound. We managed to get equal teams this time. No, we didn't, Aizawa states, and Izuku watches as All Might blinks in surprise, before asking, what do you mean? Look at Group 4. Young Midoriya's team. Yes, look at who he's with. Young Monoma? Yufu Kuda. He's with Kuda. Glaring at All Might, Aizawa asks, don't you know about the forest incident? Clearly, he doesn't. But sharing a glance with Kuda, Izuku knows that they'll give the hero a great example of what they can do. The match is chaotic, and some of his peers make joking complaints about how Izuku is always the winner. But Izuku sees how they enjoyed the matches too. It's nice. Really nice. Things are looking up, and Izuku never wants to come down. And maybe he won't have to. And isn't that a thought? Changes. It's on the third day after internships, on a normal Wednesday afternoon, that Aizawa-sensei first brings up the idea of finals. Don't forget that finals are approaching, Aizawa states, a quick display popping up on the board, showing a calendar with a date circled. There are still quite a few weeks left, but don't delay on your studies. Failing this test will mean being forced to stay back for remedial lessons, and being unable to attend the summer camp that is planned for the first years. And that's another thing that's been mentioned, to a camp. Izuku has never no, that's a lie. Sort of. Izuku has never been to a summer camp, but he's been sent to a training camp. It was a test run, Izuku thinks, a way to see how effective the different style would be for Izuku's progress. Izuku had been happier there, out in the open sun, especially when Keigo came one day to work on flying with him, and Rumi the next so they could focus on that half of his quirk. But apparently his handler had deemed it inefficient, because Izuku hasn't gone back since he was 9, he believes. Flying was fun. Being outside was fun. Being stuck in a cabin, all on his own, with nothing but the whistling of the wind to keep him company. That wasn't as fun. Now, Izuku has no doubts that this is a training camp. Yui wouldn't just send the hero kids to a normal camp. No one would. Summer is just a chance to catch up on different subjects, surely. And this time it will be intensive training. Izuku would simply be switching from one training routine for another. But the others will be there, at least most of them, guaranteed. That's what makes Izuku excited, more than anything. Izuku is fairly confident that he'll be able to pass the final. It's a written portion, and then a practical portion the day after, if Izuku has heard correctly, and Izuku is sure that he'll be able to do whatever they ask of him. He's always worked hard to pass the tests presented to him, so one more doesn't make much of a difference. His peers, at least most of them, seem to feel a different way about this challenge, however. Kaminari and Ishido seem to have lost the joy in their eyes, both slumped against the table. Jiru's face is pinched, her hand still when it had been twirling one of her earjacks just moments ago. Even Tsunotori seems stressed, if the way her shoulders have hunched is any indication. But then, when Aizawa leaves the room, and the class is waiting for Yamada-sensei to arrive, Hagakure leaps out of her seat, rippling the air with dramatic gestures as she exclaims, "Guys, we should make a study group together." Izuku watches as his classmates perk up, many of them gaining smiles as they quickly agree. Heck yeah, that's such a manly idea. That sounds great. I can probably host at my house, at least one of these weekends. I'll bring snacks for us. I can assist in mathematics, although perhaps we should defer to another for help on the sciences. Is anyone here good at English? I'm going to bomb the exam otherwise. Midoriya is, someone points out, and then eyes are turning to him. But when Kaminari asks, with pleading eyes, "Hey, Mido, you can help me with English, right?" Izuku feels his own smile dropping, turning into something regretful. I don't think I'll be able to, Izuku admits, his soft voice echoing through the suddenly silent room. I'm usually busy on the weekends. The air feels colder, stiffer, and Kaminari's face turns into something pained. Right, Kaminari says, his own voice filled with something not quite comprehensible, not to Izuku. Your schedule is really packed, huh? I'm sorry, Izuku says, the words coming out like they're instinctual. And maybe they are, but they hurt even more when Kaminari's expression turns sadder, more panicked. Don't be sorry, Kaminari shouts. It's not your fault, Midoribro, Kirishima soothes, cutting in, and Izuku feels his own shoulders untense, despite Izuku not remembering ever tensing them in the first place. Okay, Izuku says, and Kirishima flashes him a quick smile just as Yamada walks into the room. The air lightens back up. But it isn't the same. Not until lunch. Because with lunch comes Shinso, who looks oddly amused, purple eyes dancing with mirth, as he saunters over to the table and plants his tray at his spot. Vlad King utterly despises me, Shinso states proudly, with the same radiance of joy that Keigo seems to shine with whenever he gets fried chicken. Absolutely hates him, Tetsu agrees, and Yarashi nods along with a giant smile. That's good, Izuku says, head tilting, and Shinso nods with a smirk. It is. We think it'll be less than 2 weeks before he cracks. I give it 2 days, Tetsu counters, and Izuku frowns. 2 weeks until what? Izuku asks, and Shinsu's grin sharpens, turning feral with delight. You'll find out soon enough, Shinso says vaguely, and nothing that Izuku says gets him to say anything further on the matter. But let it be known that it keeps Izuku's mind off of the oddities of the morning, and the day passes with ease. And Izuku does, indeed, find out soon enough what Shinso meant that day. When the homeroom teacher of 1B enters the room just 1 week later, Shinso following behind, looking all too smug about the man's distraught expression. I can't do this anymore, Vlad King says, voice both angry and horrified as he gestures to Shinso. You wanted him to be moved up. You sent him the internship request. He's your responsibility, take him. Aizawa, for his part, stares blankly back, as if he has as little of a clue about this whole situation as Izuku does. I can't just take your student, Aizawa points out, and Vlad King scowls. Aizawa, he's been talking about you nonstop. Every time he gets the chance, he's been singing your praises. Each time they train, he's trying to mimic you with his capture weapon. I can't have a mini you in the class. I see no issue with this, Aizawa admits. Of course, because he's your fan. How often do you even get a fan? Anyways, it's rare, yeah, so why not take him? There are forms to be filled out for such a decision. Shinso is still learning under your care well enough, I'd presume. Shouldn't you be able to handle a student's likes and dislikes without bias? His voice is different now, Izuku notes, a hint of something less serious in his voice. He's messing with Vlad King, Izuku realizes, eyes widening, and Shinso seems to catch the movement because his gaze shifts, locking eyes before winking. Now excited to listen, Izuku sits upright, watching the moment unfold with a new sense of clarity. I can take care of the forms, Vlad King assures, voice higher as he begins to plead. It's nothing much for me, I promise. I'll have it done before the day is over. Nezu won't mind, either. He'll approve. But you're forgetting one thing. Which is? I have a full class, Vlad, Aizawa notes, and Vlad King scoffs. I'll take one of them. A trade, any one that you want. When Aizawa simply stands there, unmoved, Vlad King also says, I'll do all of your grading for a month as well. Please, Aizawa. I can't listen to your fanboy ramble about your capture weapon for 1 more minute, or I'll end up expelling a second student. Any of them? Shinso asks, his smile growing. Even Midoriya? Vlad King frowns, and so does Izuku. Which one is Midoriya? Izuku raises his hand, and Vlad King's eyes widen. Anyone but Midoriya, Vlad King clarifies. I refuse to take a different fanboy of yours. Shinso snorts, and Izuku can't help but shrink in on himself, ignoring the way that his face warms. You're implying that one of my students should be moved to 1B, Aizawa observes, and Vlad King sputters. Are you saying that I'm too incompetent to teach someone who is currently in this room? Or that they are not able to keep up with my teachings? You neither, hands clenching, then unclenching, Vlad King says. Your current students aren't doing poorly, but, well, Shinso is newer. Which means he'll need more of your time. So I'll take one of yours who needs more time, preferably who doesn't like you much, and with me doing your grading, we'll call it even. Fair? Izuku watches Aizawa, seeing how the man ducks his head down, hiding part of his face in his capture weapon as he surveys the room. Izuku freezes under his gaze, but his teacher moves on quickly. All right, Aizawa agrees slowly, dragging the agreement out, and Vlad King untenses significantly. I'll take Shinso, but it is up to my students to decide who wants to go to you. Vlad King nods, grateful, and looks around the room, waiting for a hand to rise. And it takes a moment, but one does, a blonde rising with it. I will go to 1B, Aoyama offers, voice rich with dramatics, as he leans down and picks up his bag. Casting a glance over the room, he says, the change will be great, but I have no doubts that the spotlight will be easy enough to claim in a room such as theirs. To me comprehend, boys? Izuku doesn't quite understand what Aoyama just said, but he's glad that the boy seems happy enough with the change. because Aoyama does look happy as he sashays out of the room, even if Shinsu's feral grin is far more noticeable. All in all, it seems like a good change. And hey, now Shinso is finally in 1A, just like he should have been from the start. Izuku doesn't see anything wrong with that, no. No, he'd never. Things seem to be clicking into place, and Izuku is more than happy with the results. And the day continues, well, pretty normally from there. Nothing much changes, not really. Aizawa still passes out the moment he's done teaching. Yamada is still as cheerful as always. Even lunch is as it has been these past few days, Shinso taking his spot just like he had the day before, offering a wry smile before eating, the sound of laughter and joy filling the air as it should. No, nothing really changes until hero training. Yet even then, not by much. Because Izuku isn't unused to Shinsu's presence, isn't thrown off by the boys' comings and goings. No, it's just to be expected. Because Izuku had expected this from the moment he saw Shinso in the gym on the first day of their internship. It's as it should be, and so Izuku doesn't feel the need to pay it much mind. So he doesn't. He's content enough to just let it be. But the world doesn't let life simply slide by, and his peers seem more hung up on Shinsu's arrival. This is why you've been so eager to piss off Vlad King, Kaminari asks. Dude, that takes guts. He expelled someone this year, didn't he? That kid was a pervert. I'm just a fanboy, Shinso says, slipping on his hero costume, a basic jumpsuit, one that is clearly inspired by Aizawa. Izuku wonders if that was intentional, and if it was specifically to upset his former homeroom teacher. He has a feeling that Shinso is just being open about his interests, which Izuku can appreciate. It's easier to understand those with open intentions, after all, and Shinso has been rather open from the start. Although there are definitely times that Izuku hasn't been able to comprehend the emotions that the boy was expressing. But he's pretty sure that's a fault of his own, not a flaw of Shinsu's. Welcome to 1A, Ida greets. I believe we met at the hospital, Shinso, right? Yeah, Shinso agrees, head tilted backwards to look up at the boy. You're the one Midoriya saved, right? Ida coughs. Izuku does the same. The question is left unanswered. But the response is clear enough, it seems. Things only become more chaotic once out of the lockers. Ashido squealing when she sees Shinsu's apparel. You have a capture weapon, too, she cheers. And Izuku blushes when he realizes that they both do, indeed, have matching capture weapons, just like Aizawa. Shinso is blushing as well, a bit flustered when Ashido adds, Kami, it's like you two are his kids. Todoroki perks up at that, oddly enough. But Izuku is more worried about how warm his face feels. Shinso, on the other hand, laughs at that comment, as if it's funny and not what? Izuku doesn't know. For some reason, this hurts. Hero training goes on afterwards. If someone were to ask Izuku about it, he's almost positive that they sparred. But Izuku can't remember against whom. He thinks he started against Ajuru, because the tailed boy is the closest to being his match. Ajuru had done better, he thinks. Izuku believes that they did a few quirkless rounds, because Ajuru wanted to see if he could do better without his tail. Izuku is pretty sure that Ajuru lost every single time. He remembers fighting Shinso, if only for a while. Todoroki, too. Maybe Monoma, or maybe it was Bakugo that he went against. Izuku will admit it. He doesn't know, because he was too busy thinking, trying to figure out why it had hurt. To hear Shinso laugh at the idea of them being Aizawa's kids. Or maybe it was just the fact that Shinso's laugh also covered the idea of Izuku being Aizawa's kid, and that Shinso laughing at his own predicament wasn't a problem. But why? Why would Izuku be upset? There's no reason to be upset. None at all. Izuku should have just laughed it off, too, most likely. Should have smiled and tossed in a joke, like Shinso. Because Aizawa isn't his father, and he isn't Aizawa's kid. Isn't anyone's kid, quite frankly. And that's just how it is. He has his siblings, he doesn't need anything more. There's no point in being upset about it. It'd be selfish to ask for anything more than he already has. He needs to accept it and continue onwards. Yet the thoughts linger, and they keep sticking around, fogging up his mind and making everything slip through his brain until Midoriya, Aizawa calls, and Izuku snaps to attention. Class is over, and he's been following the others back to the changing rooms. It's time to head out for the day. Or maybe it isn't. Nezu wants to talk to you, Aizawa explains, and Izuku hums, nods, and pretends that he hasn't been pondering familial ties for the last period. All right, Izuku agrees, out loud, and Aizawa seems to like that, nodding before turning away, a clear cue for Izuku to go. The trip to Nezu's office isn't special, but it is worrying. Because Izuku doesn't think he's done anything to warrant such a visit. But Izuku also never went to a school before Yui. He doesn't know how places like these work. So it makes sense, in his opinion, to be just a little on edge, or maybe a lot, as he enters the principal's domain, the door opening before he can even knock. The creature's cheery voice beckoning him inside. Midoriya, Nezu greets, standing upon his chair. Come in, come right on in. I've heard quite a bit about you. He has? Izuku inches into the room, takes the seat that has no back. The comfiest option despite how it's nothing more than a mere stool compared to the plush chairs that sit on either side of it. Nezu smiles throughout it all, teeth hidden away behind a perfected, closed-mouth smile. Underneath his skin, Izuku feels a buzzing sensation. It's as if he can't figure out whether he should flare his wings out of fear or out of the urge to intimidate, if he's predator or prey at this moment. But then Nezu lets his smile become more authentic, lets it sharpen, become wilder, teeth jutting out. And for some reason, the action makes Izuku settle, his instincts settling, quieting in the back of his mind. Izuku has no doubts that it should be intimidating to normal people. But the animalistic action soothes Izuku's quirk, and lets him focus more on the creature than his appearance. A part of it, too, is how the smile reminds him of Aizawa's somewhat manic grin. But Izuku will only recognize the first part, completely missing the second in the moment. I'd like to be straightforward with you, if you do not mind, Nezu says, the moment he sees that Izuku has given him his full attention, and Izuku nods, grateful. I've heard quite a bit of your talents from Aizawa, along with the occasional comment from your other teachers, and I'm quite intrigued by the results that I have seen since your testing during the recommendation exam. You seem quite ahead of your peers, and you have a keen mind that I doubt has reached its full potential. It's due to his trainers, Izuku knows. Constant, consistent studying and tutoring alongside training creates something more than what is expected on an average basis, of course. What is not expected is Nezu's next words, however. If you were interested, I'd be pleased to take you on as my personal student, Nezu states, clasping his paws together, eyes glinting with delight. I'm sure your guardian. The way he says it is odd, Izuku notes, the principal's tail lashing with the word, has taught you plenty, but a fresh set of eyes and a helping pair of paws can be beneficial. Besides, it must be terribly dull, going over concepts that you've known for quite some time. Nezu isn't wrong. Izuku hasn't learned much since coming to Yui. Not that he'd let that slip to his handler. But his handler is smart, observant. She'll probably notice, if she hasn't already, that Izuku isn't improving very much academically. She was already upset after his internship, when she learned that Izuku wasn't helped by Aizawa with his analysis, already too proficient in the skill. Nezu has a reputation, Izuku has learned. He's one of the most intelligent creatures on Earth, most likely the smartest in Japan, if the rumors are correct. His handler would never disagree with such a decision. She'd be pleased. And Izuku won't be bored by repetitive assignments. And he likes learning, likes adding new skills and talents and little tidbits to his arsenal. So, really, all of the signs point in one direction. Because there's only one thing that would make him decline, and that's the fact that he'd be reducing the amount of time that he'd see his friends. But, as if reading his mind, Nezu takes the silence to add, of course, you'd still have your hero training with your peers, and lunch with them, if you prefer. And just like that, his hesitations are gone. I'd like to become your student, Izuku agrees, and Nezu's canines glint in the light as his smile grows even sharper. Perfect, Nezu says, voice chipper with delight. And for some reason, Izuku feels very, very safe. Hitoshi waits for the last of his peers to grab their bags and leave the room before he finally moves to talk to Aizawa. Hey, Hitoshi says, and the man's eyes snap open, his nap ending immediately at the sound of Hitoshi's voice. Yeah? You're working on a case, right? Hitoshi asks, unwilling to be patient, to be anything but blunt. For you know. We've been gathering evidence, Aizawa admits. It's not as quick as I'd like. Aizawa sits up, sleeping bag falling from around him, piling in his still-covered lap. Why? Do you have anything? Not particularly, Hitoshi admits. Except I do have more people to back this up, if you need it. Who? Aizawa asks, and Hitoshi grins. It's a wild one, he knows, full of the ill intent that he's felt for weeks when thinking of Midoriya's handlers and trainers, or whatever else those narcissistic, unempathetic fucknuts want to call themselves. Hitoshi prefers the term abusers, or sociopaths, but sure, whatever. Our entire lunch table. There's 10 others who know about his schedule and his handlers. Two of them, Takoyami and Bakugo, I believe, have met his siblings, and know how infrequently they get to see Midoriya thanks to their internships. Tilting his head, Hitoshi thinks before adding, Ojuru also knows something is wrong, I think. I overheard him muttering about how odd Midoriya's training is, after they did a quirkless spar. I don't know what exactly he knows, but it probably isn't anything good. I'll talk to him, Aizawa assures, and then frowns. I don't want any of this getting around to Midoriya either. Don't stress him out over something out of his control, got it? He's got more than enough stress already, Hitoshi agrees, and Aizawa's frown deepens even more. That he does, Aizawa mutters, and Hitoshi can't help but agree with the man's distaste. He just wants Midoriya to be happy, relaxed, whatever. Anything but what he has now. The life he has with the never-ending schedules and handlers and barely seeing his siblings, and not having a favorite color until less than a month ago. Hitoshi sees red, ironically enough, and he can't help but think of how that's Midoriya's favorite color. And apparently Hitoshi has thought of Midoriya for too long, because the boy is entering the room, perfectly timed, as if he was summoned by Hitoshi's worries alone. And Midoriya looks surprised to see him still in the room, ears stiffening with surprise before relaxing, going limp and drooping partially in a calm manner. Shinso, Midoriya greets first, and Hitoshi still feels a rush of joy that Midoriya feels comfortable enough to do such a thing, no matter how mundane the thing should be. I didn't know you were still here. Tilting his head, Midoriya studies Hitoshi, ignorant to how his ears flop over on his head all the while. Then Midoriya perks up, wings fluttering, and he says, "Oh, you two were about to train, weren't you?" "We're about to," Hitoshi agrees, and a glance at the clock reminds Hitoshi that, he should be training. Aizawa seems to realize this, too, if the exhausted look on his face says anything. Maybe Hitoshi should ask that they move their sparring practice over by a day, so the man can rest, or focus on Midoriya's case, while Hitoshi trains alone. Or, better yet, want to join me today? Hitoshi asks, and Midoriya beams. I'd love to, Midoriya agrees, but then he pauses and frowns. Oh, wait. He pulls out his phone, glances at it, and sighs. I can't, he says softly. I'm so sorry. It's nothing to apologize over, Hitoshi assures. We'll spar another time, yeah? Yeah, Midoriya nods eagerly, and Hitoshi smiles. But then, as Midoriya walks past him, heading to his desk, where his backpack lays no doubt why the greenet returned to the room, Hitoshi gets an idea. A way to get information, to find out what he's missing, what was causing Ojuru's irritation. So when Midoriya turns around, Hitoshi continues on, voice casual, as if this isn't potentially very significant. I've heard Ojuru talk about how you're one of the best people he's ever seen fight quirkless, Hitoshi says, and Midoriya blinks at him in surprise. How'd you get so good at not using your wings? Midoriya laughs, clearly flustered. Oh, Ojuru had asked me when we first sparred. I'm surprised he still thinks about it. Shrugging as he slips his strap over his shoulder, Midoriya explains. It was hard at first. My handler wanted me to be able to fight even if I couldn't use my wings, so she wanted me to learn to fight without depending on them. I couldn't keep them still at first, so they started binding my wings. They bound your wings, Aizawa repeats, the first time that he's spoken since Midoriya walked in, and Midoriya nods far too easily. They still do, sometimes. It's great, because it acts as practice for getting out of restraints when we're done. They've gotten better at tying them up, but I've never been stuck for too long. Glancing at the clock, Izuku yelps, the noise coming out as a sort of chirp-like noise. I need to get going. Good luck with training, Shinso. And then he's gone, leaving behind nothing but anger. Maybe it's a good thing, Hitoshi thinks, that today is a sparring day. He thinks that he needs it, quite frankly, because despite not having erasure, all Hitoshi can see is red. Kami. He hopes that Aizawa can help his friend. The boy needs it more than he could ever realize, and more than Hitoshi thinks he knows. And isn't that terrifying, the idea that more may lay below the surface? Truly. Multitudes. Time skips ahead, a routine forming revolving around Izuku's new schedule. Days pass quickly, hours lost as Izuku soars ahead of his peers, of his years, Nezu's careful planning working perfectly around the tutelage of his past, to make his present worthwhile and his future all the better. His handler is pleased, too, just as Izuku had hoped. Life with the commission has been easier, because of this. They trust Nezu to cover his academics, and, surprisingly, didn't try to fill too much of his remaining tutor session periods with training. No, they've assumed that Izuku will need the time for assignments given to him by the principal. Izuku won't tell them that he isn't using the full time for academics, even if the purposeful omittance makes him feel guilty. It's worth it, Izuku thinks. This tiny act of rebellion, so to speak. For once, Izuku feels as if things are almost calm. His routine is still present, his workload rather large, but there are tiny pockets of air to breathe in during the never-ending deluge. It's nice. These tiny pauses aside, Izuku's schedule is one that Izuku looks forward to. He shows up in the morning, bright and early, as he always does, where he goes to want to wait until homeroom. He talks with his friends on the days that are good, and sleeps on the days after those where his handler decided to push him past his limits. When Aizawa enters the room, Izuku remains. As the class representative, it makes sense to do this, as Aizawa often drops tidbits of information that become important for their future. Events, deadlines, exam dates. Nezu had agreed to let Izuku stay for homeroom. It only makes sense that you are not with me for the entire day, Nezu assured, after Izuku tentatively asked for the first period to be with his class. I am a principal as well, I won't be stealing you away all of the time, just most of it. And he had been true to his word. Gone is Izuku's time with Cementos Sensei, Midnight Sensei, and Ectoplasm Sensei. Izuku has been well learned in history and literature for a while. Books an old escape of his for when he wished to soar. But his wings were far too sore to even try. Mathematics was nice, but Nezu is happy enough to teach him lessons that the third years have yet to cover, and perhaps never will. English is, technically, a free period of Izuku's, but Izuku likes to sit with his peers for the hour. So he sticks with one as Yamada lectures them, tuning them out in order to focus on his own studies. And then, of course, there is their class of hero studies at the end of the day, which Izuku participates in within his peers. It's the only time, other than lunch, that Izuku is able to actively talk and work with his peers. It's different than simply being near them, much more exciting and enthralling overall. It's in this manner that time flies by, leaving Izuku with just a week before finals, feeling as if barely a moment has passed. But it's been far more than a mere moment, noted by how Aizawa stands before them yet again, this time noting the quickly approaching end-of-term exams. Exams will be next week, Aizawa reminds his students. They will be split up. The written exams will be on Wednesday, the practical exam will be on Thursday, and we will go over results on Friday. Remember that this will cover the entire term, and that your practical exam will test how far you've grown over the term. If you fail, you will be taking remedial lessons. Those who pass will go to the camp. Do not slack off on your preparations, especially if you were being lazy in the previous weeks. Aizawa looks around the room, and then nods. That is all. Use the period as you wish, but do not wake me. And just like that, he's asleep. And his peers do not hesitate to make good use of this fact, getting up and moving, friend groups clumping together. Hagakure is the first to move, grabbing Jiru and pulling her over to Asui's desk, while Honuki also gets up, heading over to Ajiru, who is also joined by Monoma. Kuda, Sato, and Shaoji begin to discuss something, a conversation that must be interesting because Siro turns and joins their discussion. Ida, bewildered, attempts to work alone, but soon finds himself drawn into whatever discussion the three girls are having, much to his apparent surprise. Izuku's desk, too, becomes surrounded, many of his friends choosing to approach his space in order to chat with one another. Tsunatori, Todoroki, and Takoyami simply turn, angling their chairs to face in his direction. Kirishima is quick to leap onto Takoyami's desk, Kaminari sitting on the bird-headed boy's spot as well, and Bakugo comes even closer, taking his own spot on Izuku's desk. Shinso wanders over, Ashido following, the former leaning against the wall behind Izuku, the latter perching on Tsunatori's desk. It's almost startling how many of his peers surround him, choose to be with him. Almost. Because, really, they've done this time and time again. So rather than being silent with shock, Izuku smiles happily instead, delighted to have such wonderful companions. I'm so nervous, Tsunatori is saying to Ashido when Izuku tunes into the conversation. The study sessions have helped, but the practical is concerning. To be fair, Kirishima starts, we can't really study for a practical, especially if we don't know what it is. I could barely study for the written portion, Kaminari complains, leaning against Kirishima as if fatigued, face pinched. I mean, English? Math? I'll be lucky if I pass by the skin off my back. If you weren't messing around with raccoon eyes, tape face, and earjacks the entire time, you'd probably get shit done, Bakugo remarks, and Kaminari sputters. You were there once. You have no clue how much I've studied. One eyebrow raised, Bakugo asks. So you're saying I'm fucking wrong? Dunce face. Kaminari pouts, crossing his arms. No. Ha, figured, Bakugo states, then rolls his eyes. Study on your own, if group sessions just get you more distracted. It's not that hard to figure out. Is that why you haven't shown up to any more study sessions? Tsunotori asks, and Bakugo scoffs. As if I could get any shit done with a bunch of extras, asking me why I got everything right. Harsh, Kirishima whispers, and Kaminari nods sagely. Todoroki and Shinso, who have previously mentioned not going to a single get-together, seem unfazed by the banter going on around them, instead watching on without much of a reaction at all. As for Izuku? Well, Izuku can't help but wish that he had been there, if only so he could laugh along with their jokes. But there's no way for that to happen, and Izuku knows this, so he ignores the part of him that wishes to join in, to be a bigger part of the group and fit in more, instead looking to Ishido just as the girl asks. So, what do you guys want to do this summer? The part grows, and it does so quickly. I'm heading up to visit some family after camp, Kirishima says cheerfully. My uncle works as a martial arts instructor. I'm thinking of asking him to spar with me. Nice, Kaminari cheers. I'm going to spend the summer here, but I think it'll be nice to just laze around. Who knows yet? I will also be here, Tsunotori says. My host family has offered to show me around the city more, though, just as my family has promised to do for theirs. Ooh, what do you guys plan to do? I am unsure. I have heard there is a beach not too far, though Dagobah Beach, I believe. Perhaps we will go there. It's trashy as hell, Bakugo says, and Tsunotori frowns. I am sure it is very pleasant, Tsunotori defends, and Bakugo snorts. No, I mean literal trash. People use it as a free dump for their garbage. You can't even see the sand beneath all of the piles. That's so unmanly, Kirishima states sadly, and Izuku nods along with the rest. It's certainly upsetting to hear such a thing. Well, I suppose a different beach, then, Tsunotori decides, then faces Bakugo and asks, and what about you? You cannot go to the beach either. I never fucking planned on going, Bakugo shoots back. I don't fucking know. Stick to my usual workout. Not have to deal with extras yapping all of the time. Get some peace and quiet for once. He's like a grandfather, Kaminari comments softly, causing Bakugo to let loose a small explosion as a warning. On and on, his peers go, each one hinting at their plans for the break. Takoyami plans to go to a concert, Ashido wants to check out a new mall, and Shinso has mentioned a cat cafe that he likes to go to occasionally. They all have such nice things that they look forward to, even if the majority just have plans to relax and do nothing at all. And Izuku can't help the tinge of envy that begins to sink into his bones, doing its best to warp his smile and his joy. And then they turn to him, and they ask, what about you? What do you want to do? But Izuku doesn't know. And Kami, it's such a recurring thought that Izuku can't tell if he wants to laugh or cry. He doesn't know the answer to that either. He hasn't got a clue, not a single one. Izuku is beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it's an issue. Because Izuku thinks that this probably isn't normal. Everyone else has answers, so why doesn't he? What is Izuku doing wrong, that he doesn't have a single answer he can give about what he wants to do? He knows what he will be doing, training, studying, being tested and pushed to his limits, because he needs to be better, but what he wants. What does Izuku want, that he doesn't have? He has friends. He goes to school. He has teachers that treat him with far more care than a teacher probably would normally, or maybe just as much as normal. But Izuku has never had a teacher before. He has Keigo and Rumi. What more should Izuku ask for? What more does he have the right to ask for? Does he have the right to ask for much more? Or is that too selfish? Or is it simply expected? Much like it is expected to have a favorite color, a favorite subject. So many favorites that Izuku has never considered. Is Izuku supposed to have answers to all of the questions that his peers ask? His friends all have answers, and Shinso has made it clear that he thinks they're ones that should normally be answerable. But what if they are the unusual ones? With how Todoroki watches on, confusion shining in his eyes, Izuku wonders if he may have assumed too quickly. Because Todoroki also doesn't seem to have an answer, only watching on with a gaze that wanders back and forth, trying to catch up with the world around him. So Izuku answers, hoping that it will help provide clarity. I don't know. I'll just be training, probably. The mood deflates, but Todoroki perks up. I'll be training, too, Todoroki murmurs, and Izuku tilts his head, oblivious to how his peers watch the exchange with growing concern. Do you have a schedule to follow, as well? Izuku asks, And Todoroki shrugs. Sort of. Endeavor doesn't set specific plans, just general times. Todoroki glances down, looks at his hand. Izuku wonders what he sees in them. His eyes so hazy with recollection. I think I'll mainly be working on my fire. I know when I have breaks, Izuku says, thinking of the never-ending timetables, slots filled out to the minute. Would you like to text, over break, call? Todoroki nods, eyes brighter, clearer. I'd like that. So would Izuku. I wonder what his training is like, Izuku thinks. Maybe I'll ask. He thinks, then, of how much he dislikes thinking about his own training when he doesn't have to be. He decides not to ask more questions would only be annoying, he has no doubt. Especially ones on such a subject matter. We'll text, too, okay? Kirishima is saying when Izuku tunes back into the world, looking away from Todoroki's eyes and letting his own look at the others. We've gotta. Yeah, Ashido cheers. We need a group chat. Guys, we already have one, Tsunotori points out, then frowns. Wait, no. That does not have everyone in it. Not yet, Kaminari says, whipping out his phone, smile odd as he does, almost pasted on. Add me in, Tsunotori. Me too, Ashido cries out, and Tsunotori giggles before opening her phone, beginning to add their friends to the chat. The mood feels lighter, but not perfect. But Izuku can't do a thing, because Yamada enters the room, and there is no chance to change what has been. Not that Izuku knows what he'd even have to do. The morning goes quickly. They always do. Now, Nezu knows exactly how to keep him occupied, to keep his mind from wandering too far, too easily. He puts it to use now, until Izuku has to focus, has to pay attention to the principal's chipper tone. Yet for all that he listens, his mind wanders. Drifts, just a little to the left. He can still hear the creature's words, the concepts he's trying to explain, the effects of an animal-related quirk on one's actions and reactions. A world of thought that Izuku knows well, but he doesn't quite process them all. Gaps are missing, filled by assumptions. And that's enough of that for today, Nezu says cheerfully, closing a book that he never once glanced at, and Izuku blinks up at the man, then down at his notebook. The pages are covered in words, everything looking comprehensive, understandable. He doesn't remember writing any of it. Not really. We've still got a bit of time before lunch, Nezu notes. So why don't I tell you about your written final? Izuku nods along, shutting his notebook and sticking his pencil back into his messenger bag. Nezu smiles, clapping his paws together. Perfect. As you likely already figured, you won't be taking the same test as your peers. I'll be giving you a special exam of your own, based on what we have discussed so far. Seeing Izuku's no doubt questioning look, he explains, it won't do us much good to test you on what your other teachers have taught, since we already know that you have their subjects mastered. Ah, that does make sense. This does mean that we won't be putting you in the class rankings for midterms. However, Nezu admits, your academics are following a completely different path than theirs. It wouldn't make sense to compare your score. Izuku is pretty sure that Nezu is trying to offer him a sort of compliment. But all he can focus on is that he, once again, isn't the same as his peers. It's an annoyingly repetitive trend today. Izuku is learning. Too foolish to have favorites. Too busy to have plans of his own for the summer. Too different to even be ranked with the rest. He's too. And for as little as the idea makes sense, Izuku can't help but duck his head, eyes averting from Nezu's gaze to meet the desk instead. Nezu stops talking. Is something the matter, Midoriya? Nezu asks, and Izuku shrugs, feeling rather silly about everything going through his head. It's nothing important, Izuku assures, because it really isn't. It's just selfish, that's all that it is. Self-centered and impolite. Then you won't mind sharing it, right? Nezu asks, and Izuku glances up, spotting the principal's gaze. It's calculating, inquisitive. Izuku answers. I think I may be behind. Or missing something? Izuku shrugs again, lets his wings tuck in on himself, cocooning his body. My friends, they have favorites. Favorites? Nezu asks. As in, friends that they prefer to others. No, I don't know about that, but no. Izuku glances up, around, and his eyes land on Nezu's ever-present cup of tea. Like that. You always drink the same tea. It's my favorite, Nezu agrees. And Izuku nods quickly. Exactly. You have a favorite tea. Shinso has a favorite hero, and a favorite color. Kirishima has a favorite hero, and Tsunotori has a favorite animal. Hands wringing, Izuku admits. I didn't have a favorite hero or color until my internship with Aizawa. I didn't know I was supposed to. There are so many things I don't have favorites for. That's not necessarily bad, Nezu says. I don't have a favorite for many things. But does that make you think of me in a negative light? No, Izuku says immediately, because he doesn't know if anything could make him see Nezu poorly. Nezu is far above his level. There's no way Izuku could look down on the principal. Your friends do not think poorly of you for not having things that you favor above others either, Nezu assures. And you do not need to have a favorite thing for every topic. It is more a matter of if you'd like to have a favorite thing. Do you? I don't know, Izuku admits. I think I do. It sounds nice. Then it will happen naturally, Nezu promises. Do not force yourself to do things that you do not want to for the sake of what others may think, alright? Izuku blinks, confused. That's not advice that his handler would agree with. Perhaps it only applies to matters such as this. Why does that feel wrong, though? Izuku brushes the thought aside. It's likely nothing to be worried about. Nezu is still watching him, teeth still prominent as he grins. And when Izuku doesn't find a response, he asks, "Is there anything else you would like to talk about?" Izuku considers telling him about summer, about how he'll do nothing but train while his friends go and relax, or explore, or do whatever they do when not preparing for the future. For some reason, though, he doesn't. He's been selfish enough. That's everything, Izuku lies, smiling brightly. Thank you, sir. Of course, Nezu says. Now, why don't you go on ahead to lunch? Izuku does, paying no mind to the way Nezu's tail lashes into the leather of his seat, sharp and whip-like. He pays no mind at all. Izuku is the first one to the cafeteria, and he takes his usual seat without much flair. Shinso takes his normal spot beside Izuku. Todoroki slides into the seat across from him. And then Takoyami breaks the trend by bringing a familiar girl with wings that flutter in delight when she sees him. Nice to see you again. The winged girl Akihiro, Izuku believes, says with a wink, just as Takoyami opens his beaked mouth to speak. I don't think I've ever introduced myself. 10 million. I'm Tori Akihiro, proud member of the Hero and Business Course. Your brother is fun to talk to, by the way. Izuku blinks, then smiles. Izuku Midoriya, Izuku responds, somewhat thrown off guard, because, first of all, you know my brother? Takoyami and I interned under him together, Akihiro explains, gesturing to Takoyami before clasping her hands together. He took me in because he's a stickler for the birds of a feather flock together rule, apparently. Not fully sure, considering I lost in the cavalry battle, but hey, it was really neat getting to train under the number 3 hero. Izuku nods, because, yeah, that's exactly what Keigo would do. He has no doubts that, had there been a student with a rabbit quirk among his peers, Rumi would have snatched them up quicker than Keigo can eat an entire bucket of chicken. Your brother truly does believe in those who are alike coming together, Takoyami agrees. As much as I would like to acclaim his offer to be thanks to my prowess in battle, we all know it's because of his bird face, Dark Shadow says, emerging from Takoyami unprovoked. Anyways, Takoyami cuts in. I digress. I wanted to introduce you to Akihiro, as I presumed that you may be able to further your abilities, or at least find kindred spirits to bond with, upon meeting. I was unaware that you already knew one another. We met in the support labs, Akihiro explains easily. He was getting an upgrade from Hatsune, and we talked a bit. We don't know each other that well, yet, so you're all good. I see, Takoyami says, looking very much like he does not see what Akihiro means. You're in 2 courses? Todoroki asks, turning his head to look at the girl, and Akihiro nods. Yeah. That's allowed? Shinso asks, and Izuku wants to know that, too, because he's never heard of such a case before. Kind of, Akihiro responds, then shrugs. It was a mistake, actually. I got into 1B, but on my paperwork, they thought I had written business for my course instead of hero. How? Shinso asks, and Akihiro blushes, embarrassed. I have chicken scratch for handwriting. Izuku isn't quite sure how bad handwriting could make someone confuse such different words, but he nods along nonetheless. Weirder things have happened in the world, after all. So you went to the business course, and then what? Ashido asks, joining the conversation easily as she plops into her seat, more of their table joining with her arrival. Well, I quickly realized that there was a mistake, so I spoke to Nezu. He said that my spot in 1B was still open, as I had, technically, given them the correct paperwork. So they couldn't take away my spot once they'd already offered it. Especially not when I accepted before the deadline. So did they kick someone out of 1B to give you your seat back? Shinso asks. I know I only got in because that Minta kid got expelled. The pervert, Akihiro recalls easily, albeit rather unfondly, then shakes her head. No, they left it open for a sports festival student. If I hadn't made them aware of the mistake, then you would have still gotten into 1B no matter what. Not that you stayed with us, Shinso. What can I say? Shinso says, a gleeful grin covering his face. I'm a bit of an Eraserhead fan. Ken-sensei threw a party when Aoyama took your spot, Akihiro says bluntly, and Shinso snorts. He made a dartboard, but the target was Aizawa-sensei. Shinso closes his eyes, then opens them back up. You know what? No. I'm not surprised. I am surprised that I didn't know you were in 2 courses at once, though. I go to business lectures either before or after school, depending on the day of the week, Akihiro explains. It's an odd method, but it works. You're not overwhelmed? Izuku asks hesitantly. But Akihiro just shakes her head, happy enough to respond. Not really. I enjoy heroics, and I enjoy learning about the business side. This way, should I need to retire from fieldwork early, I'll be able to hop right into the other side of the business. Glancing at her phone, Akihiro frowns, the first time her smile has left her face since she arrived. Shoot. I've got to go meet up with Meki and Jutsu, or else they're going to be messing around in the labs all hour. We'll talk more later. Yeah. Izuku nods slowly, and Akihiro rises. It was nice meeting you. I'm glad I finally got to talk to you more. And then she's gone, heading off to continue her day. Her day that seems to be just as packed as Izuku's, yet in a whole different way. How can she be so energetic? Shinso murmurs, watching Akihiro bounce away. I mean, damn. She's in 2 courses here? What the fuck? What the fuck? Indeed, Izuku can agree. But a part of him can't help but be in awe of how much Akihiro is able to accomplish. And it makes him wonder. Is that something he can do? Can he just have multiple interests to the point of having dual careers? All of the teachers do that, Izuku thinks to himself, and he hums. It's food for thought, he supposes, although it does make him ask himself. What would Izuku want to do, had he had the chance to pick 2 paths in life? Once again, Izuku doesn't have an answer. But on this matter, at this point, Izuku doesn't think it's worth losing sleep over. No, he thinks he's doing fine just as he is. Besides, there are more important things to focus on. Like finals. How fun. Exams. All things considered, Izuku doesn't think exams were all that bad. The written ones, that is. Nezu had pushed him, of course, but Izuku was prepared. Nezu's smile when grading had helped to ease his nerve, too. But today is the day of the practical exam, and Izuku has no idea how that will end up going, or what will even happen in the first place. Ideas run wild in Izuku's head as he approaches his classroom, different possibilities coming to mind. They could be facing robots, much like the rumors have stated. Or maybe they'll be competing against each other, or even against 1B. The training camp will be alongside their sister class, after all, so Izuku supposes that it would make sense to fight them, and see what goes from there. Or maybe it will be something underwhelming, like a quirk apprehension test. A way to see how far they've come since the beginning of the term. No, that's not very plus ultra of Yui. Izuku tosses the idea out of his mind, and walks into the room. He's surprised to find that he's not the first one there. No, Kaminari and Ishido are already sitting together, looking rather frantic as they look over sticky notes. Brightly colored sticky notes, with different ideas scrawled on them. Hi, Izuku says, the greeting more a question than anything else, and the 2 shoot up, eyes training on him immediately. Midori, Ishido cries. We're trying to figure out how many robots we're going to face. Nezu probably had a say, didn't he? Did he tell you? I'm calling 50 a person, at least, Kaminari says. I've just got to use my support gear, and I'll be all good, right? He doesn't sound like he believes himself. Nezu hasn't said anything about the practical exam, Izuku admits, and both wilt, drooping in on themselves. I'm sure you'll both be fine, though. They perk right back up, although it's clear that they're both a little weary, nodding along with his words. Like determined flowers, he supposes, as odd as the analogy feels. Analogies always seem to feel that way, though. One by one, Izuku watches his peers arrive, entering through the large one door. Some seem nervous, others try to get excited. Bakugo seems the least concerned, smiling wildly as he takes his spot, hands already clenching with anticipation. They're all tense in their own ways, but Izuku has no doubts that they can pass if they all do their best. Yeah, it'll be fine. The bell rings, and Aizawa walks into the room, sleeping bag absent as the man shuffles in. Let's go, he says immediately, and the room falls still. Get your costumes on and meet me outside, by the field. 10 minutes. And then he's gone, and the world unpauses. Izuku watches his classmates move for the case rack, some inching forwards, others all but sprinting to grab their stuff. Izuku moves along steadily, grabbing his case and heading out of the door, Shinso and Todoroki flanking him on either side. They're some of the first ones there, and Izuku wastes no time to unlatch his case, glancing at the label of his case 20B, good before pulling out the stealth-themed suit. "You think that'll be more useful today?" Shinso asks when he spots Izuku pulling on the black jacket, and Izuku nods. "My daylight suit is more noticeable. No matter what my opponent is today, I'd rather have the option of stealth if I need it." "Smart," Kaminari praises, and Izuku flushes. "Thanks." He's still the first one out of the locker room, a habit that hasn't changed, and Aizawa nods approvingly as Izuku lets his red goggles slip down, dropping around his neck. They wait in silence, but not for long, because Izuku's peers make sure to dress as quickly as possible, not wanting to be late for the most important day of the term. "Robot time," Kaminari cheers with Ishido, who lets out a whoop of delight, and Izuku almost turns his head to look at them. But then he spots something odd. Slowly, tentatively, Izuku lets his gaze move back to Aizawa's form, only to settle on the man's capture weapon. It's larger than normal, wider. As if there's something in it. The something shifts, the capture weapon budging. Izuku sees a flash of white, brighter than the color of the weapon. Izuku blinks, recognizing that familiar shade, and then he lifts his eyes up to see Aizawa grinning, offering a quick wink when they make eye contact. Ah! Izuku keeps his mouth shut. But he can't fight the smile that climbs up his own face. The 10 minutes run out, and Aizawa clears his throat. Instantly, 20 pairs of eyes are on him. "It's time for your practical exam," Aizawa states. "Now, it's been made clear to us that you've heard some rumors on what your upperclassmen face, yes?" "Robots," Ishido cheers, louder than before, and Aizawa's grin sharpens. "In previous years, the first years did fight robots," Aizawa agrees. "This year is different. Instead of robots, you'll be fighting us," Nezu chirps, popping out of Aizawa's capture weapon, and Izuku watches the light drain from the eyes of far too many of his peers to be a good sign. "Please not Nezu," Ishido whispers. "I think I'll die," Kaminari agrees, and Izuku blinks slowly. "Nezu isn't that bad, is he?" "Surely not." "Wait," Shinso says, voice wary. "You said us." Nezu's grin widens, and the ground opens up. A line of pro-heroes emerging from the ground in a dramatic fashion that his teachers seem to adore. Not that Izuku can blame them, it is rather cool. Anyways, Nezu continues on, as if he didn't have some mentos practice that special reveal just for this moment. "Aizawa, would you like to inform your students of their assignments?" Aizawa sighs, stepping forward and lifting a hand, pointing down the line of teachers. "Honuki, Sato, you two will be facing some mentos. Asui and Takoyami will be fighting ectoplasm. Ajaru and Ida, your opponent is Power Loader. Tsunatori and Kaminari." "Oh no," Kaminari murmurs, paling, but Aizawa just continues on. "Your opponent is 13. "I'm safe," Kaminari whispers, and, "Oh, he's crying, isn't he? Huh." "We're blessed," Ishido cheers, and Aizawa's gaze locks with hers. Ishido and Koda are facing Nezu. Ishido drops to her knees, eyes blank. "Huh." Jiro and Shinso are facing Present Mike, and Hagakure and Shaoji will be up against Snipe. "Kirishima, 0, your opponent is Midnight. Bakugo and Monoma, you'll be up against All Might." And then Aizawa looks Izuku's way, and his smile widens, teeth showing. "Midoriya and Todoroki will be facing me." And Izuku, for his part, looks at the man's capture weapon and sighs. He has a feeling that he knows how the exam will go. Right. Buses will depart in 5 minutes to your testing grounds. You will have 30 minutes to complete your exam, either by escaping or by subduing your opponent with handcuffs. Good luck, you'll need it. And just like that, each of the teachers go their separate ways, all moving to their respective buses. Instantly, there's chaos, some praying for their lives, others begging for advice. Izuku watches on with a blank face, stone still as he watches his peers react to the pressure. "Huh. So," Shinso starts as he approaches, drawing Izuku out of his head. "Any last words before Aizawa tries to murder you too?" Izuku blinks, then smiles. "Well, at least it's not All Might," Izuku chirps. "It would have been interesting to pair up with either of his opponent, sure. But I wouldn't want to try my hand at beating him. That's not Izuku's purpose, after all. He only has 2 people that he has to be better than. Beside Izuku, Todoroki looks vaguely sick at the thought of fighting All Might. I'd be snapped in half like an icicle, Todoroki states. I'll take my chances with Aizawa. Godspeed, Shinso says. And then he's gone, strolling away to his own bus. They should do that too, shouldn't they? Yeah, they should. The trip to the testing grounds doesn't take long, but it's a chance for suspense to rise. Aizawa doesn't even bother to feign sleeping, instead openly watching the two the entire time. Izuku itches to plan, to find a way to beat the man immediately. But he can't do that when his opponent is listening. So instead, he has to sit awkwardly still, trying not to grimace as his wings hit the back of his seat for the 4th time in a row. Are you okay? Todoroki asks, and Izuku nods before shifting, turning sideways and sitting on his knees so that he can have his wings behind him, now hovering over the seat to his side. Mutation quirks, they're great, but call me, they can get in the way sometimes. Imagine if Aizawa could erase a mutation. How would that look? Izuku wonders to himself, and then he pauses. Aizawa can't erase his quirk. So why is he Izuku's final opponent? It has to be the capture weapon, Izuku decides, tugging at his own. Aizawa's eyes follow the motion immediately, and Izuku hums softly. Yeah, there has to be a correlation. Izuku frowns, watching Aizawa carefully, then stretches his wings. Aizawa watches that too. Izuku scowls, earning a confused look from Todoroki, because he knows exactly why Aizawa is his opponent now. Kami. He dislikes having his wings bound so much. But getting them bound and tangled. Izuku is going to die. Shouta gets off of the bus, watching to make sure Midoriya and Todoroki get off as well. Both are unnervingly silent, but that's to be expected. They each have problems with communication. It's one of the problems that this exam is supposed to help with. You have 5 minutes before the exam begins. When that does, you may enter the city. You will have 30 minutes to try to escape, or to defeat me. You both have your handcuffs, correct? Both boys lift their pair, and Shouta nods. Right. Your 5 minutes begin once I cross through the gate. He's not even 4 steps away when he hears Midoriya murmur, Todoroki, I have a plan. And, well, at least he knows that one of their challenges will be met. He wonders if they'll get through the others. Using his capture weapon to leap onto a nearby rooftop, Shouta runs through the list in his head, trying to remember what all he has to do for the test. Todoroki relies on his quirk too much, so Shouta will be using Erasure to target that. He's not the best at teamwork, either, but he seems to have a bond with Midoriya. Encouraging him to rely on Midoriya's help, Midoriya, who has a knack for analysis and a quirk that Shouta cannot erase, should open up Todoroki's willingness to work alongside those he isn't quite so close to. Midoriya needs to be more confident in himself as a person, and it seems that this goal is already being met, so long as Todoroki trusts him and his plan instead of branching off alone. There isn't anything specific otherwise that Midoriya needs to be trained out of that a 30-minute exam can touch on. His ability to work with a team is already well off. He's been trained far past his age, but Shouta can act as a difficult opponent to him thanks to his capture weapon. Midoriya dislikes getting tangled up in the scarf, just as much as Todoroki dislikes losing his quirk. If Shouta gets both of them at once, they will fail the exam. It's up to them to protect themselves and one another, in order to best him. Midoriya is stealthy, but both are good at remaining silent. There's quite a few shared traits between the two, in a way that bothers Shouta more and more with every similarity. A way that makes Shouta glad that Nezu has been looking into the creation of dorms, preferably sometime in the 2nd term. But trauma isn't something Shouta can touch on right now, unfortunately, and the 5 minutes are up. So Shouta has to shove his worries back and keep his eyes on the streets, on the skies, goggles hiding his view, and acting as a precaution. He has no idea where his students will be. Not yet. He'll find out soon enough. They don't take long to appear, or rather, Midoriya doesn't take long to appear. The boy flies in the air, high enough that Shouta knows he's out of range, circling Shouta like a vulture would its dying prey. Red goggles cover his eyes, no doubt to protect him from the wind, and his scarf is wrapped tightly around his neck, keeping him warmer. But his coat is gone, exposing his arms. Where is his coat? A flash of blue is Shouta's only warning before he lunges off of the roof, evading a massive glacier that fills his peripheral vision. The starting point is Todoroki, who wears the coat, likely in an attempt to stay warmer, even with his fire to regulate his temperature, enabling him to get away with slightly larger attacks. Midoriya follows Shouta, still tracking him from above, still out of reach, and Shouta has no doubts that he's acting as a beacon for his teammate. They must know, then, that Midoriya is safe so long as Shouta cannot reach him. which means that they must have known the second way for an automatic win if Midoriya had simply flown off with Todoroki at the very beginning. Just like how Midoriya got through the cavalry battle during the sports festival all those weeks ago. So they're here to prove something, or try something. Either way, Shouta will give them the fight that they're looking for. Todoroki comes into view, and Shouta wastes no time, flashing his quirk and forcing Todoroki to either fight or flee. The boy doesn't hesitate, racing forwards, and Shouta meets him halfway, capture weapon surging out, lashing at the dual-haired recommendation student. Todoroki attempts to dodge, but Shouta isn't going that easy on them. It only takes a moment for Todoroki to be restrained. And it only takes a few seconds more for Shouta to hear the wind whistling as Midoriya attempts to dive straight into him. Lunging to the side, Shouta lets his quirk drop, keeping an eye on Midoriya while Todoroki attempts to free himself. It's hard for the boy to do so, especially when Shouta still has a hold on the part that binds Todoroki up. But he's doing his best. Think you can save him? Shouta asks, cutting his capture weapon so that he can send a reel at Midoriya. You'd have to evade me and get him at the same time. Can you manage that, Midoriya? No, Midoriya admits, just as Shouta snags him, the cloth catching the boy at his ankles and tying them together, sending the boy falling to the ground. But I don't have to. And then Midoriya twists, repositioning so he's no longer on his wings, and Shouta has a split second to realize that Midoriya may not have been a mere lookout from the beginning. The next second, Shouta is watching Midoriya beat his wings, pulling himself into the air despite how Shouta still has him in the capture weapon, still has a grip on the other end. And that grip is Shouta's downfall, because Midoriya is pulling him off of the ground to... Shit, Shouta thinks. And then he thinks it again when he hears the crackling of ice racing towards him, wrapping around his lower half, creeping up his chest and locking his arms in place. Todoroki is still restrained, still has his hands pinned to his sides, but his feet were free, and that was enough for the boy to engage. It's been 6 minutes, 7 at most, when Midoriya swoops down and slaps the handcuffs around his wrists. Izuku Midoriya and Shouta Todoroki have passed. A robotic voice announces, and Shouta sighs. He's not surprised that they won, but he expected it to take at least a few more minutes. Then again, it's the recommendation students. Yeah, this was about what he expected. Good job, Shouta praises. Not get me out of here. Sensei? Midoriya responds. We're both a bit trapped, too. And they are. Midoriya can't undo the bindings around his feet, which keep him too far from Todoroki to help the boy out. Todoroki, just burn yourself out, Shouta advises, but Todoroki frowns. But then I'll burn Midoriya's coat. Tilting his head, Todoroki says, I can't do that. Why not? Shouta asks, and Todoroki shrugs. It's Midoriya's. Of course. Shouta sighs, then tests the ice, seeing how much he can move. The lower half is completely encased. His torso won't budge an inch, but he can move his arms some. Right, he can work with this. All right? Follow my instructions. And that's how he spends the next 20 minutes getting Todoroki to awkwardly stumble over his own glacier, unable to balance due to his arms being pinned to his sides, so that he can help Todoroki out of his bindings, so that Todoroki can unfreeze him. Exams. Who would have thought it would be the aftermath that was the hardest part? Shouta just hopes the rest of his class can be as efficient as these two. That's an unfair hope, and Shouta knows it. But hey, a man can dream. It's been 10 minutes since their exam started, and Juzo Honuki is starting to worry if he and Satu can actually pass their test. He has nothing against his classmate, of course. Satu is an intelligent person and a strong fighter. But his quirk has weaknesses, such as his time limit, and his steadily decreasing cognitive functions that drop with every usage of Sugar Rush. Cementos is smart, Juzo knows. He's been keeping his distance, putting up more walls between them every time they advance. He's keeping them away, stalling them. Cementos and Juzo don't have time limits, but Satu only gets a boost of 3 minutes each time he activates his quirk. He's used his quirk twice so far, and already he's starting to become a little bit denser, a little bit slower to process what he needs to do. They have 20 more minutes, but Juzo knows that Satu won't be able to last that long. Satu's style is quicker. He's a heavy hitter, made to take things down fast and hard. If they're going to win this exam, it won't be the baker's way. No, it'll have to be different. Not so straightforward, something more flexible, something more manipulative. Softening is an odd quirk. Juzo can soften anything non-living, and it's useful. He's good at making traps that only he can maneuver through. his body able to slip through the softened substances in a way most others cannot. Softening the walls around them would give Juzo a path through, but would trap anyone else who went in them. Which is good, if Juzo can get to Cementos. But he does not want to hinder his partner. He needs a plan that doesn't involve them coming to their opponent, but rather drawing Cementos in. They need to bait him in. But what would bait Cementos closer? What would make him drop his guard, make him approach? Sato breaks another wall with a scream, 3 more fly up in front of them. Juzo turns around, watches as a ring of cement walls raises us, begins to form a dome. He gets an idea. It's not straightforward. It's not even ethical, most likely. But Juzo has an idea. Sato, Juzo says, and Sato looks away, movement sluggish as he turns. I have an idea, but we need to act quickly. Sato listens, unable to process as much as before, but still able to understand plenty, to comprehend what he needs to do. He does his part, beginning to hit one of the walls, one that Juzo knows for a fact has a layer directly behind it. And when it collapses, Juzo opens his mouth and screams. It's quick work from there. Juzo drops to the ground, eyes shut, hands outstretched, falling limp. Sato piles the cement on him, light enough that he can breathe, covering enough that it looks as though the wall fell on him. As Sato does this, he begins to cry out. Honuki, Sato shouts, letting his voice sound thick and distraught. Honuki. The walls around them fall to the ground, Cementos racing forwards, taking in the sight before him with obvious concern. Sato, what happened? Cementos asks, already moving, trying to get the rubble off of Juzo. Juzo slams his hand on the ground, and it softens, Cementos quickly sinking. Startled, the man lurches backwards, only to fall, hands sinking into the wet substance as well. Sato, Juzo cries, and Sato pulls him out of the broken concrete. He glances at Cementos, then says, run. He wanted to handcuff the man, but with how much of him is stuck in the softened ground, Juzo doesn't know if he'd be able to get a handcuff around him. But it's fine. He'll just have to come back to unearth the man. 16 minutes into the exam, Juzo Honuki and Rikudo Sato pass through the gates. An instant victory. If Fumikage Takoyami is learning one thing from this exam, it's that he's a lot weaker than he ever presumed himself to be. Fumikage, of course, always knew that he had a dependence on Dark Shadow, but most people do the same with their own quirks. Especially heroes, who rely on them as assets to complete their tasks and save the day. Fumikage has always known that he has to reach a middle ground with his sentient quirk, in order to be the best possible hero, a light in the abyss. But now he is seeing just how blinded he has been, how lacking he is in the rest of his training. It is as depressing as it is encouraging, a message of who he must become. His shadowy companion may be fierce, may hold immense power within its wispy form, but Fumikage can bring so much more to their partnership, if he only puts in the effort to learn. Tsuyu Usui is a good show of what Fumikage should strive for. She is versatile, quick, analytic, strong and smart. Not quite the top of the class, but close. She is strong in all kinds of combat, excels in water-based rescue missions. She is adaptable, a well-rounded hero in training. And she is, undoubtedly, the key to their victory. Dark Shadow is Fumikage's partner, but Usui is his teammate, and Fumikage turns to her for advice on how to pass the exam and defeat ectoplasm. She's smart, and she understands how to play her cards well. They stick close, but play long, his partner and her tongue acting out, lashing at the clones, trying to find the proper one. Ectoplasm, too, is smart. He is not as adaptable to quite so many areas. But this is his playing ground, and he is the one with the advantage. And their teacher has a trick of his own, one that sends them sprawling, embedded into the wall. But Usui, once more, perseveres. And she is the one to get the handcuff on their teacher, dangling from his leg. Yes, Fumikage may pass today's challenge, but it is an uphill battle. One that he will climb, with great hopes of who he will one day become. Truly, a mad banquet of darkness awaits him. If Mashirao Ojiru could come up with an analogy for his final, he thinks that it'd be about riding a bicycle. Riding a bicycle, once you learn what to do, how to hold the handlebar and push the pedals, all while keeping balance. That's pretty easy. It's something that hundreds, thousands of children learn how to do every single year, with summers full of laughter and scraped knees that come from the early days of testing and getting things just right. Not too fast, or you'll tip. Not too slow, or you'll meet the same end. Keep it steady, keep on going along, and you'll be cruising without problem. Riding a bicycle is like sparring. Once you know what you're doing, it's easy to stop thinking and go with emotions. Mashirao knows, too, that this is because he's had quite a bit more practice than most of his peers, having taken to dojos and different styles to make up for how plain his quirk can be. There's only a few people in the class that are on Mashirao's level. Midoriya, Bakugo. No one else really puts up as much of a fight. They're improving, yes, but they're still in their early days. The scraped knees are clear on most of his peers, but not Mashirao. Mashirao only worries about the handles when he's facing Midoriya or Bakugo. And even then, it's a casual, loose grip. Now Mashirao is holding on for dear life. Because he's got a city bike and power loader is making him ride on a countryside hill, covered in bumps that are just asking for bruises. Power loader is a tricky opponent, because he makes it so this fight isn't a spar at all. No, it's road stops and blockades, little tricks meant to trick Mashirao and his teammate up. It's confusing, bizarre, and Mashirao can't simply sit back for the ride right now. Especially when it's worse for his partner. Tenya Ida is impressive, Mashirao will give him that. He's built for speed, though Tota, and that's undoubtedly why Power Loader is their opponent. In a terrain like this, Ida can't use his quirk well, if at all. There's too many tricks waiting to be triggered, too many sharp turns and jagged angles. Ida has to take it slow, while Mashirao has to find his pace, and boy is it frustrating. But that's the point. Power Loader's entire goal, the whole idea of the final exam, is to push them to their limit, so that they can pass it. So Mashirao will ride his bicycle, and he'll work past these bumps and potholes. Except wait a second. Ida, Mashirao says, feeling rather stupid for a moment, because Power Loader can only have the traps work so fast. He can't activate them faster than you can run. It's silly, Mashirao thinks, what he's about to suggest. But well, life is like riding a bicycle. And sure, maybe riding on Ida's back at a speed faster than the explosions that go off just as they pass them. Then getting thrown through the escape gate isn't quite the same. But hey, they passed, at least. Mashirao won't complain, not now. For now, he just wants a break off of this weird bicycle called life. 13 has seen quite a lot of oddities over their years. But they think that this batch of hero hatchlings takes the cake. They've seen Ijiru Kirishima slam his head through a wall just to prove that he could. It took 2 days to get all of the mess found. The boy had caught wires in his teeth, too, which only made things worse. They're pretty sure that Hantasiro and Mizo Shaoji exchanged money over that. But that's none of their concern. They've seen Toru Hagakure attempt to climb up a wall to reach a ledge, no doubt for easy spying, only to continuously fall down because, well, she doesn't have a quirk made for climbing up a frictionless wall. She ended up on the ledge, somehow, and 13 doesn't want to know if the girl got up there herself, or if someone boosted her up. And 13 doesn't even want to think about the time they tried taking a stroll around campus, only to stumble upon Izuku Midoriya and Kuji Kuda standing beside each other, surrounded by what 13 can only call an army of birds, both handing out seeds and gentle words with the grace and kindness of legends. And they especially don't want to think about the fact that Fumikage Takoyami and Dark Shadow had been there as well, kneeling before the duo. The point is, 13 has seen a lot, especially within this past term. The class of Wana is rather bizarre, in ways that 13 can see but not quite describe, can attempt to explain, but cannot quite comprehend. 1A is a rather strange group, rather fearless yet frightening, young and naive yet powerful and fierce. They're an enigma in their own rights, and it's only been a few months since they first got to Yui. Yes, 13 has grown used to some of the abnormalities of this class. But watching Denki Kaminari throw himself at them like a human taser, with Pony Tsunotori screaming war chants in the background. Yeah, that's pretty fucking odd. But hey, plus ultra, right? Yeah, let's go with that. Mina Ashido is screwed, dead, fucked. However she could word it, she will. And Kuji Kuda, beside her, doesn't look all too sure of himself, either. Neither of them do, because their opponent is Nezu. Nezu, as in Principal Nezu, as in the most intelligent being in Japan Nezu. He's chaotic, he's sadistic, and it seems like the only person who isn't afraid of him is Midoriya. Bless that sweet bean's soul. Midoriya has to be the only person in the history of ever who is happy to be around the rat-like creature. Huh. Is that why Midoriya is Nezu's personal student? No, probably not. But it probably doesn't hurt. But Midoriya isn't the one who has to go toe-to-toe with the harbinger of fear himself. So Mina thinks she gets a pass for how she's shaking in her boots. We're doomed, Mina murmurs, and Kuda pats her on the back consolingly. A part of Mina, though, wonders why they're paired together. She knows why she's here. She's not one to kid herself on these kinds of things. Mina is a certified idiot, and Nezu's strongest muscle is his brain. It makes sense for her to be here. So why is Koda her partner, then? Shouldn't it be someone else, like Kaminari? Maybe that's why we're paired up? Mina mutters to herself, watching the 5-minute timer go down quicker than she'd like, making her nerves rise with every second gone, never to return. What's Koda got that Kaminari wouldn't? Is it a quirk thing? Koda's quirk isn't offensive. It's more dependent on animals. Are we supposed to brainwash Nezu? Mina yelps, and Koda stares at her in surprise, before slowly shaking his head. Yeah, that's probably the right answer. She's not sure how they'd even manage to get to Nezu. And, well, can Koda use Anavoice on Nezu? Test that one day, Mina mutters, then glances around. Okay, she can do this. She can come up with a solution. So she's not the best with strategies. But she's heard Midoriya analyze a few times when Shinso prompted him for information. She can mimic that, surely. Okay, so using Anavoice on Nezu should probably be a last resort. Just in case Nezu holds grudges over things like that, she really doesn't want to be on his bad side. But they wouldn't toss Koda into a match without giving him something to work with, right? And then she sees it. A flash of feathers. At first, Mina thinks it's Midoriya. But no, that can't be right. It's just a bird. The forest incident comes to mind immediately, along with the second forest incident, and Mina grins with delight. Koda, Mina starts, and Koda looks at her with worried eyes. Are you ready to be a Disney princess? Koda beams, and for the first time in her life, Mina feels like a genius. Nezu may be smart, but he's no match for a flock of birds. No, Koda and Midoriya have trained the Yui avians far too well. Hitoshi Shinso has been in Wano for a while now, but even after weeks of being with the class, he feels like he's barely started bridging the gap in skills between them. That's what he gets, he supposes, for slacking off on physical training, because he was so bitter over how the world viewed his quirk. But, well, that's just another problem he has to fix with time. One that he will fix with time, but that doesn't mean he has to enjoy every step of the process. Especially not this one. Hitoshi stares at his former homeroom teacher as the man walks through the entrance, the 5-minute countdown beginning. Kyoka Jiru stands by his side, looking unnerved as the man walks further into the grassy training ground. 2 voice quirks versus a much louder voice quirk, Jiru murmurs, sounding just as exasperated as Hitoshi feels, and Hitoshi sighs. I can't tell if this was Aizawa's decision or Nezu's, Hitoshi admits, earning a snort. How does your quirk work, exactly? I can plug my jacks into a nearby surface and use that to send out an attack based on my heartbeat. If I plug my jacks into the amps on my legs, I can cancel out attacks to an extent. If someone hears me and responds, I can make them do what I tell them. There are some limitations, like whether or not a person can actually do what I instruct. But they can't break out of my control unless they're knocked into. Or if they fall from the sky, Jiru says, undoubtedly recalling the sports festival, and Hitoshi nods. Yeah. Present Mike teaches 1C, right? Do you know anything that might help us? Hitoshi hums, trying to remember anything he's learned about the man, then nods again. He can only control his quirk if the speaker around his neck isn't damaged. Otherwise, there's no direction to it, and he's pretty much a loose cannon. So damaging it might throw him off, but it could make things worse. What else? He's terrified of bugs. Damn. Koda would have been perfect for this matchup. Shoot, you're right. Tugging one of her earphone jacks, Jiru asks, anything else? Because we can't just throw bugs at him, he'll probably try to keep us away, especially with you around. Frowning, Hitoshi admits. The only things I know otherwise probably won't help. We've got 2 minutes before we die or pass. Just spit it all out. Right? Hitoshi will always find it strange when people tell him to keep talking to them. But it's getting easier nowadays. Shrugging, Hitoshi lists off anything he can think of. Mike likes old American musicals. I once walked into him blaring something from Fuck. I don't even know what it was. He likes cooking. He's got the worst sense of humor, like English puns and dad jokes kind of humor. Midoriya is his all-time favorite student, and I'm pretty sure that's not clear to the 1C kids, because one girl was a teacher's pet and definitely assumed she was his top student, but you know how it is. Jiru stares up at him, and Hitoshi shuts his mouth, wondering if she got anything useful out of that. She did, apparently, because her nerves fade away, a smirk crawling onto her face as she asks, Hey, how do you feel about flying? Oh, this will be fun, huh? Hisashi Yamada thinks that he's been doing pretty good for his part. There's already been an announcement of one team, passing it sounds like it was Midoriya and Todoroki. Unsurprisingly, and Hisashi is still going strong. Not too strong, of course, but he's definitely not slacking on these two. It'd be unfair to play this thing easy, after all. They're here to be challenged, and Hisashi is willing to fight fire with fire for them to grow, stoking up their own flames, even when they feel like they're being washed out. It's about time for another scream, Hisashi thinks, and so he lets one loose. It's not as strong, a little bit lighter, but he hasn't seen the purple-haired duo since he first waved goodbye at the entrance. They've got to be feeling the hits, if they've been unable to reach him. And the only reason Hisashi knows they're still going is because he's seen Jiru's blasts colliding with his own a few times, canceling them out. But she didn't cancel this one, and that feels off. Are you guys alive? Hisashi asks, Quirk confused with the question. And then he waits for a response. And he gets one, in the form of a violet-haired boy being shot through the sky, right at him. What the fuck? Hisashi murmurs, Quirk falling silent in his confusion as he watches Shinso lash out with his capture weapon, wrapping one end around a tree and pulling himself to the ground. Only to miss the landing, stumbling and rolling over himself until he's laying just in front of Hisashi's feet. Hey, Shinso breathes out, gasping for air before offering a tired smile. Why did Aizawa-sensei cross the road? What? And everything goes blank. Heck, if Snipe could describe how he's feeling in one word, he probably wouldn't anyways, because there's no singular word to describe how much he wants to cry in this instance. A sad cowboy emoji might do the trick, but Snipe doesn't quite think that he has the vocabulary to properly convey such an idea out loud. The point is, Snipe kind of wants to sit down and cry for a quick minute. Thank you kindly. One may think Snipe is being a bit dramatic, but Snipe thinks that his feelings are completely valid. It was just supposed to be a normal exam, after all, and Snipe was ready for that. This ain't a normal exam, by far. It started so calmly, too. So perfectly that Snipe could have shed a tear at the plain beauty of it all. He was set to go against Toru Hagakure and Mizo Shoji, two kids with a lot of stealth practice. They would have gone up against Aizawa in order to try out stealthing him. But then Snipe would have been up against the recommendation kids, and, well, Snipe remembers the Aschi. And he perfectly remembers how feral both kids had been back then. And Eraser had flaws he could fix for them with that matchup. So Snipe's new goal was to track the stealth kids. Well, somewhere across the line, Snipe must have failed, because he lost track of the little lass. Not the most difficult feat, losing her, considering that she had shucked off her gloves and boots, making her completely invisible to the naked eye. And speaking of nudity, that's exactly why Snipe wants to cry. Because at some point during a tussle with Shoji, Hagakure had tried to sneak up on him. And Snipe accidentally elbowed the poor girl right in the boob. Hoo boy, had she made that clear, hissing and scaring the living bejesus out of him. Snipe hadn't known what to do. Nothing like that had ever happened before. He hadn't even registered when the girl slammed the cuffs on him in his shock, only to cheer and race off, no doubt trying to find her costume, uncaring the moment he was defeated. At least Shoji seemed sympathetic to his plight. But still, Snipe wonders if Kayama has any whiskey hidden around the school. He has a feeling that he might just need it, right now. Kami. He sure is glad that the term is practically over. He's not sure how much more he'd be able to take. Only one group fails, and Ijiru Kirishima is ashamed to admit that it's his own. But neither he nor his teammate, Hantashiro, could get close to their opponent. It was midnight, after all, and they'd be unconscious if they breathed in her quirk. The goal had been evasion. Get to the exit, don't worry about capturing the enemy. Sometimes it's manlier to just take the safe way out, instead of failing miserably. But then Shiro got caught, and Ijiru couldn't just leave him. The mere idea went against, like, all standards of manliness, broke all moral codes in his head. Why should Ijiru go through and leave Shiro to the villain? It wasn't a bro move, not in the slightest. And so Ijiru hardened his skin and his resolve, and he tried to grab his teammate so he could hightail it to safety. He woke up well over an hour later, without any recollection past stepping into the mist. Damn. I think we failed, Shiro mutters from the bed beside him, and Ijiru sighs. We did, yeah. No camp for us. No camp for us. Damn. Yeah. There's silence. And then, hopefully. Bro, want to get ice cream after school? Bro. Yeah, they may have failed, but they'll get through their remedial lessons together. Like real men. Nito Monoma doesn't know what higher being hates him for wanting to have good things in life. But oh man, sometimes they take it too far. The first case was clear. When Nito got into class 1A, the superior class, obviously. only for them to get attacked in the first week at the UST. He still gets nightmares, remembering the sudden drop through the portals, that odd creature known only as Namu, the way Aizawa and Midoriya had laid limp on the floor, both beaten, bruised, and bloodied. The second case, perhaps, could be whatever the fuck happened during internships. Neato may not have been in Hasu during that catastrophe, but hearing how his peers had once again gotten in the path of a bloodthirsty villain, Neato thinks he'd be much less stressed in 1B already. And now here he is. Neato has always wanted people to see his quirk, to see him for as powerful as it can be. But to pit him against All Might as a result? No. Fuck no. For a moment, Neato wonders if it'd just be better to take the loss. But he's got Katsuki Bakugo, the resident angry Pomeranian, as his teammate. And while Neato doesn't want to eat explosions today, thanks. So Neato sucks up his pride, knowing he won't see his dignity for much longer. Not with the, #1 hero in all of Japan as his opponent. And then he looks at Bakugo. Alright, what do you want to do? I'm gonna beat his ass, Bakugo states, with the confidence of 1,000 men too many, because Bakugo is only one boy, and Neato sighs. This isn't going to go well at all, is it? No, probably not. Okay, sure. What am I going to do? Neato asks, because he's a good planner, but he's seen Bakugo, and the boy seems to have a war guide in his head, cover to cover. But Bakugo doesn't plan shit. Stay out of my way. I've got it handled. The timer beeps, and Bakugo stalks forwards. Neato gapes, then follows, sure that he misheard that. You did not just say what I think you tried to, Neato declares, and Bakugo scoffs. I've got it handled, copycat. Just keep out of the way, and I'll beat him. That's All Might. Yeah? He's the #1 hero. Yeah? You fucking were literally first years? How in the actual fuck are you expecting to beat him single-handedly? Like this, Bakugo says, and then he just launches forwards, giving away their position and picking a fight that they really shouldn't have taken. Staring at a camera that's undoubtedly on, tracking the final, Neato offers his most deadpan look that he can. Maybe he should have taken the 1B spot, instead of letting Aoyama escape from the chaos of their class. But no. Now Neato gets to deal with whatever this mess is. Whatever. Bakugo will figure it out pretty quickly that they can't beat All Might alone. And then they team up, right? Wrong. Neato watches on as 10 minutes pass. Then 10 more, Bakugo still acting like a feral dog, as he tries to keep All Might's attention purely on him. By now, he's accepted his fate, because Bakugo shoots an explosion his way every time Neato tries to pursue the exit. You are not running to the gate, you off-brand knockoff, Bakugo shouts, before yet again lunging at their opponent, who seems just as confused as Neato feels. No doubt wondering why Bakugo isn't just a distraction at this point. At least let me copy your quirk, Neato shouts. But Bakugo growls, literally growls at him. Isn't Midoriya the one with the animal quirk? Takoyami? Why the fuck is Bakugo growling? Don't touch my damn quirk, Bakugo shouts, and Neato sighs, because of course Bakugo is territorial over his explosions. Okay, sure. There's still one other quirk that Neato can copy, and it's even stronger than Bakugo's. A new goal in mind, Neato enters the fray, lunging in and attempting to bitch slap All Might, just so he can say he's done it. The problem is, All Might is a giant, and Neato is a teenage boy who is waiting on another growth spurt, so he only manages to slap the man on his chest. All Might laughs, grabbing Neato's collar, and Neato wastes no time to slap at the man's hand, making contact. A valiant effort, I suppose, All Might consoles, trying to look demeaning and doing too good of a job for Neato's comfort. But Neato is more worried about other things. But perhaps young Bakugo should have let you mimic his quirk first, so that you... Hey, wait, Neato murmurs, unaware of how All Might freezes, still holding the blonde in the air by the back of his coat. Why can't I copy your quirk? The next thing he knows, he's flying through the air, straight towards the exit gate. One thought comes to Neato's mind, tinged with disbelief. Did All Might just throw me? And then he hits the ground, a cheerful voice calling for their victory. The last thing Neato can recall is Bakugo's angry shout of, "Oh, fuck it," before hearing the spiky blonde sprint towards him. And then the world disappears. Neato is really starting to dislike the whole plus ultra vibes in this school. But sure, whatever. At least he passed. Izuku vibrates, watching the last fight end with wide eyes. Bakugo and Monoma had taken quite some time, sure, coming down to the final 10 minutes. But their fight was so cool. Odd, sure, because Monoma seemed to have startled All Might into giving them the win. But definitely one to remember. Speaking of one to remember, Izuku can't help but turn to Shinso, who looks like the cat who caught the canary. Oh, that's not a phrase that Izuku likes very much, given his bird-like traits and tendencies, as he leans up against the wall. Shinso spots his shift in attention and raises an eyebrow. What's up? Shinso asks, and Izuku takes the cue happily. You shot through the air, Izuku says. I saw your fight on the screen. How did you do it? Jiru hit me with one of her attacks. It sent me flying, Shinso explains, knowing exactly what Izuku means. We knew it'd be weird, and figured it'd be enough to catch Yamada off guard. It did, Izuku agrees, and Shinso snorts. I know. Tilting his head, Shinso says, I heard the announcement. You were the first to pass, right? Yeah, Todoroki is a great partner, so it wasn't too hard. Leaving after the fight was harder, Todoroki agrees, joining the conversation, and Shinso blinks at that, confused. How? We all got stuck, Izuku admits. It was a bit of a mess, admittedly. But it worked, Todoroki supplies, and Izuku nods happily. It did. And all of you are done, Aizawa cuts in, walking into the viewing room and turning off the screen. Go get out of your costumes, we'll see you tomorrow. Izuku listens, walking out, listening to his friends as they all try to explain how they got through their exams. He'd caught bits and pieces, each exam slightly staggered on when they started, allowing him to catch a bit of most other exams once he finally got back to the starting point, where Recovery Girl had a little viewing station set up. But watching is much different than hearing how his friends went through the tests. It's nice, Izuku thinks, and he's glad that the term is ending on such a good note. Just a bit longer, and then it's summer. And for once, Izuku has something to look forward to for the season. How nice, indeed.